Chapter 75. 2. Prodigious youth. Upon saying that, he then left on his own. Qin Feng then swept his gaze over the young group of people in front of him, and then pulled out a white-colored palm-sized rock from inside his sleeve, before placing it in the center of the training hall. In the instant that the rock was put on the floor, it suddenly expanded and grew to become about half a man's height. All of you can now go test yourselves with it. I need to know your gifted talents and your level of power. That white rock was called a gift rock, and basically everyone in these lands where might reigns supreme would know what it was. It was used to test a person's gifted elemental attribute and their level, and this piece of rock of Qin Feng's was even more superior, where it was able to shrink or expand at will, making it easy to carry around, unlike those gift rocks in the sects which were large and bulky, completely immovable. This rock was like an upgraded artifact. Yan Shiro's face paled, and she was just about to say something when she saw Qin Feng's sharp eyes turn onto her. She immediately lowered her eyes and took a deep breath in resignation, before she went walking over a step at a time, to finally place her hand on the rock. A faint glow appeared upon the gift rock, a muddy yellow color. With the exception of Yan Shiwu, everyone else present were stunned. Even Qin Feng's stone-faced expression showed a brief moment of cracking, like he had not expected such a situation at all. Light of that color was clearly of the earth element, with extremely strong defense powers. But the earth element's light was always a brilliant and vibrant yellow, and the manifestation of such a faint elemental glow just told everyone that was the mud element. And what was the mud element? It was something similar to the earth element, but just a mere touch of it, inheriting just a tiny bit of its defensive attributes. Putting it bluntly, it was a clumsy and bumbling offshoot of an element brought about by a trashy and useless body constitution. No wonder Yan Shiro had looked as if death was impending. With such useless talent that could only be said to be a one-of-a-kind, it was little wonder she said that going to the Faint Mist sect was as good as sending herself to her death. Yan Shiro hung her head as she stepped away. She was so ashamed of herself at that moment that she could not even lift her head up to see all the mocking faces. Yan Shiwu looked at her and creased up her brows before she stepped forward to become the second one to go take the test. A light blue glow flared briefly upon the gift rock and faded away. It was the water element, and looking at the intensity of the light, it would seem that she had just recently comprehended her elemental powers and had just stepped over to enter the realm of cultivation. The brows of Qin Feng knitted up so tightly it could easily kill a fly. Compared to Yin Ning Luo in the past, these two girls were not only slightly inferior to her, but could only be described as incredibly lacking and inept. His gaze then turned towards the young boy and girl pair with highly outstanding and beautiful looks the other side. His gaze deepened, having noticed that the two of them had been calm and composed right from the beginning, their demeanor steady. He then wondered whether they really possessed great power, or were they just putting on an act. Qingyu looked at the gift stone with interest before she patted the young lad on the shoulder and said softly, "Why not you go have a try? I would like to see what kind of a level you have reached." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingbei nodded, and he pushed his wheelchair right before the gift stone and leaned forward to place his hand on it. A blinding blue and purple light immediately exploded out from the stone. Qin Feng's bright eyes sparkled at that moment. Lightning! However, in the next second, another golden light appeared, and within that golden light that was as brilliant as the sun, there was a sliver of bright red that looked like blood. How is that even possible? Qin Feng just could not believe his eyes at all. Is this the gold element? But that sliver of red inside was clearly what only the fire element would show. Could that be a transformed variant of the gold element? A form of power that was even stronger than the gold element itself. Chapter 75. 3. Prodigious youth. Qingyu raised an eyebrow when she saw that gold mixed with red. Why does she feel that? She has seen that elemental power before. Mistress, that is the blaze element. Children who are descended from the bloodline of that long ancient family would inherit this gift. And the blaze element in Mistress' body is even stronger than the kids. Zhang Mai's tiny voice said from inside her body. Blaze element? Qingyu was hearing that for the first time, and she could not help but feel curious. Then, what is so special about this element? It gives the ability to self-heal. No matter how severe the injury is, the wielder of this element will be able to heal and restore himself. The attack ability of the blaze element is even more dominant and ferocious than the snow element, and at its peak, it is able to kill a super expert with just one hit. Zhongmai explained. Qingyu could not help but smack her lips when she heard that. It's really that powerful? Isn't that as good as cheating with the divine artifact? Even when one is beaten up half to death, he will still be able to recover very quickly and not know exhaustion. That will be the case under most circumstances, but it has its advantages and disadvantages. One can only be injured once a day, and if they continue to get hurt, the pain felt would be 10 times the norm. Qingyu was speechless. How terrifying, better not get injured. On the other side, Qin Feng's eyes that were looking at Qing Bei had already changed completely, undoubtedly seeing him as a peerless prodigy. One that even surpassed the greatest female prodigy, Yin Ming Luo. Although Qingyu checked out with a fire element after that, but compared to Qing Bei's lightning element, and another transformed gold element, hers did not come to be all that impressive anymore. Among these 4 people here, Qing Bei's gifts were the most outstanding and Qin Feng was exceptionally amiable towards him. But when he saw him sitting upon a wheelchair, he could not help but feel a tinge of regret. With such exemplary gifts, and he was confined to a wheelchair. A classic example of the heavens being jealous of heroes. What is your name? Qin Feng asked as he looked at the youth with a gentle gaze. Responding to the elder's words, I am called Yin Qing Bei, and this is my sister, Yin Qingyu. Although he did not know how Qingyu had managed to suppress her gifts to make it appear so ordinary, which threw him into the limelight, he was still not willing to have anyone slight him in any way. Qin Feng nodded his head. Not bad, not bad. The both of you are rather good. As for your legs, the elder can rest assured. My legs are already on its way to recovery. The Lord Elixir Cultivator in the palace has said that I will definitely be able to stand up within half a year's time. Qing Bei opened his mouth to say, that's great. Otherwise, if your physical mobility is affected, it will greatly affect your chances of being accepted into the Faint Mist sect. Qin Feng nodded his head to say, looking satisfied. Yan Shiwu's gaze darkened, her fists tightening up, but did not say a word. Yan Shiro's eyes had grown red-rimmed, her gaze filling up with hatred as she stared at Qing Yu and Qing Bei, who were getting all the attention, and she bit her full and luscious lips so hard that blood trickled out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Why was she born with such a useless and trashy body constitution? But those 2 little bastards who had always been inferior to her, children born from a lowly concubine, could possibly possess such prodigious gifts. She did not want to go to whatever Faint Mist sect at all, but right at that moment, she had already been shamed and completely humiliated. Qin Feng then gave the young youth more instructions before he turned towards Yin Shiwu and said, your talent is rather weak, and you have just started to comprehend elemental powers. But it is still not too late, and what you have to learn to do now is to absorb the spirit energy from your surroundings to strengthen your cultivation, and I will teach you how to do that in a while. Yes, Yin Shiwu answered. After Qin Feng finished saying that, he then turned to the pale-faced Yin Shiro. As for you. Chapter 76. 1. Upgraded lightning summoning palm. Qin Feng's voice paused a moment before he said, learn to comprehend your elemental power first. From ancient times, people with useless spirit foundations had seen miracles happen before. You are of the earth element, and if you can raise your defensive abilities, you can become a very good supporting force. Thank you, Elder, for your pointers, Yin Shiro said submissively. Qin Feng was exceptionally amiable towards Qing Bei, and hence he gifted the youth a martial arts technique cultivation manual the first time they met called the Lightning Summoning Palm. Qing Yu had probably gained some favor, as well on account of her younger brother, as Qin Feng was also all smiles towards her, as he taught her a set of cultivation chants for fire element wielders that would help increase her powers. Those actions had undoubtedly caused Yin Shiro, and Yan Shiwu to further hate the pair of siblings out of jealousy. After that, the few of them then started with their first day's training, while Qin Fong remained on the side to observe them in silence. Firstly, on Yan Shiwu's side, although her level of talent was average, she won out on being willing to put in effort. Under Qin Fong's guidance, from her ignorance of the water element in the beginning, she was actually able to form up a stream in the end skillfully as she willed it, surprising even herself. When she first just came to comprehend elemental powers, she was only able to form up a few droplets, which would disappear in a mere instant. She was now actually able to call forth such a great amount of water, and all of that under her control. The discontent and disappointment Yan Shiwu had felt before quickly evaporated, turning into such a huge surprise where she then said very gratefully, "Elder, have I improved?" Qin Fong nodded his head solemnly. "Not bad, you aren't really all that dense. Continue practicing." Yes. In contrast, Yan Shirua with her useless talent soon came to affirm her title as useless. Qin Fong had shown her extra attention, and told her how to search for her elemental power in her sea of consciousness, to look for it bit by bit, and capture them all in the end, to transform them into her own power. Close your eyes and keep your mind free of distractions. Cleanse out your consciousness. You cannot hear anything, you cannot see anything, and before you is just an endless sea of stars. There are some specks of light around you. Slowly go close to them, and try to interact with them. That is the elemental power in your body, and you need to get them all to return back into your body before you can completely awaken the earth element. Yan Shiro did based on what Qin Fong told her, but when she closed her eyes, it was pitch black before her, nothing that she could see. She knitted her brows together and tried very hard to calm herself down, as she attempted to sense the elemental powers around her. "Now do you see them?" Qin Fong's hesitant and friendly-sounding voice rang out. "Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You know there is nothing at all." Yan Shiro shut her eyes tightly, and said in exasperation. Qin Fong's brows furrowed together. "You need to search without any distractions in your heart. If your heart is not calm, you will not be able to sense the faint elemental power." Yan Shiro's brows knitted up more tightly together, but the harder she forced herself to calm down, and to not think of a single thing, her heart just grew more frustrated and angry, which caused her eyes to flare open in rage. "No distractions in my heart. How can I not be distracted? My mind is completely filled with thoughts of those two bastards Qing Yu and Qing Bei. Based on what can those two who are of such lowly birth possess gifts so much better than mine? I cannot accept that. They should be the useless pieces of trash, and I should be the prodigious one." She had probably held everything inside for too long, and Yan Shiro was not about to care about anything this time, but to vent everything she held repressed inside out. Qin Fong was startled by her reaction, and his already stern-looking face then darkened further, before he snorted derisively and turned around to leave, tossing out a single statement saying, "Nothing can be carved out of rotten wood." Chapter 76. 2. Upgraded lightning summoning palm with his identity as the Faint Mist Sect's elder back then. He was well respected, as he was acquainted with Yen Su, and he had tutored the greatest female prodigy, Yen Ning Luo, before. He then agreed to come give these few kids some pointers. But he had never thought that such a heroic figure like Yen Su, who was so righteous and stalwart, would have such a narrow-minded daughter, who would be such a failure. It would still be alright if she knew she was not gifted and refused to work hard, but she still went on to blame the gods and accuse others, jealous of her younger sister and brother. A person with such character, even if she made it into the Faint Mist Sect, might very well go down the wrong path in future. Qin Fong then went over to another side of the training grounds, in a gloomy mood, to where Qing Yu was practicing her cultivation. Going over there, he was suddenly taken aback a moment, his eyes staring wide in astoundment. He had initially thought it would be easier for him to observe their ability in comprehending their powers by separating the four of them, but when he came over here, he saw the brother and sister pair here together. He did not even begin to throw a fit, but just stood there staring incredulously at the scene before his eyes. Qingbei's legs had completely recovered several years ago, and Qingyu had naturally not let him slacken in his cultivation. With the thousands and thousands of martial art secret manuals kept in the Qing family's library, it was only a matter of days for Qingyu, who had a photographic memory, to completely memorize them all. She had made copies of a few of those manuals and given them to Qingbei to practice and cultivate. To Qingbei, the lightning summoning palm, far paled in comparison to those martial art manuals his elder sister had given to him, and hence he did not think all that much of the manual he had just received. What? Although that is just a low-grade martial art technique, but learning another technique will not do you any harm. You can use it to hide your powers when needed. If those covetous and unscrupulous scoundrels were to discover that you possess such supreme-grade martial art techniques, be careful that you might draw persecution upon yourself. Qingyu said as she gazed at the youth who was looking rather haughty, and could not help but mock with a laugh. Qingbei raised an eyebrow. I am not praising myself here, but a martial art technique like that is not worth learning. Upon saying that, as if afraid that she would not believe him, he raised his hand and struck a palm upwards into the air. His action looked to be gentle without having exerted any strength, but once that palm struck, the lightning-type strike resonated over a large area. The skies that were clear for thousands of miles suddenly rolling with the rumble of thunder, which startled a flock of birds to fly up into the sky. And Qinfang was completely stunned by that very scene he saw. Others might not know it all that well, but that technique was the one he had just personally given out. So how could he possibly not know? When the lightning summoning palm was cultivated to its highest level, one would be able to alter the weather, summoning lightning and thunder, and they could direct the power lightning as an offensive attack that dealt great damage. The name lightning summoning meant that one would be able to summon lightning and thunder at will. And the youth had not used much of his strength with that highly casual strike of his palm just now, but he had actually been able to cause thunder to rumble. The lightning summoning palm had not even been in his hands for an incense stick's time. It was impossible that he would be able to master it in such a short period of time. Then there can only be just one other possibility. That boy possessed incredible powers of comprehension and was blessed with extraordinary gift, a prodigy that would come to shake the world. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, however, that was still not finished, and there was more that would astound him even more. After Qingyu saw the youth's strike of his palm, she raised up an eyebrow strangely. It seems like the lightning summoning palm still has room for further improvement. She took the manual from the youth's hand and flipped through it with a glance before she discovered there was some parts that felt wrong. This is incomplete. At least a third of it was missing, or it could possibly be a medium of superior grade martial art technique. So it is an incomplete copy. No wonder I was feeling that there were some parts that did not make sense, and its power seemed to have been weakened by quite a bit. Qingbei complained as he thought about it. Could Elder Qin have hidden a part of it in secret? Chapter 76. 3. Upgraded lightning summoning palm. What a rascal! Qingyu rolled her eyes at him. Can't you see that it's because the old elder likes you? That is why he is giving such a precious martial art manual to you? What he had is just this incomplete copy. And moreover, he is not a lightning element user-wielder himself. So what good will it do him to hide it for himself? Being admonished, Qingbei pouted and said, I was merely just saying that casually only. Qingyu rubbed her chin thoughtfully and looked carefully at the words indicated inside the manual. Only when the powers of lightning and flame are combined will their powers be brought to its peak. Could that really be the case? The frail and slender-looking beauty then gathered her entire body's energies together, and she swiped the tip of her finger over the center of her forehead. When she opened her eyes again, gold and red light flashed for a brief instant before immediately fading away. She flipped her bare open palm over, and a ball of red and golden light had formed up in her hand, looking even more bright and brilliant against the fair and white skin of her hand. The power of lightning flame generally calls for the fire element to be infused within, Qingyu said softly. And then before Qingbei's surprised expression and Qinfang's stunned and incredulous stare from a far distance away, Her palm then made a sizzling noise, clearly displaying the blue and purple-colored light of the lightning element. With her body straight and erect, she raised her palm up high. The power from the two elements fused together, immediately causing the clear sky to darken, the ominous gray hanging up above suddenly rumbling with thunder, before a bolt of lightning came striking down. Seeing that, Qingyu quickly dispersed the power, as that bolt of lightning had struck merely a few meters away from her, and everything then disappeared, while the sky gradually went back to normal. Here they were playing with the weather, which properly terrified a whole bunch of people outside. What is happening? With such clear skies for miles, and a bolt suddenly just appeared out of the blue? Have I been possessed? I almost thought that I was going to be killed by that bolt. Never thought that I would still be alive. Could it be possible that some unmatched experts are fighting a duel around here? This is just too dangerous. I had better go find a safe place for me to hide, before I get caught up in an unexpected disaster. And over at the training square, Qingbei looked at the skies that had returned to normal, and suddenly gulped before he said mechanically, "That bolt of lightning just now. I almost thought I would not be able to escape disaster. That feeling was just too real." Qingyu blinked her eyes, looking rather innocently at him. "I was merely showing you how it's supposed to be done." That lightning summoning palm manual is indeed lacking, and there is much room for improvement. But with that huge commotion you summoned in just now, I would think that the elder knows about it already. Qingbei said in helplessness. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. So what? Just tell him that it was you who was practicing the lightning summoning palm just now. With your prodigious talent, the old man will just think that you have very strong comprehension ability, and will not suspect anything. Qingyu said with an indifferent expression on her face. But Elder Qin seems to have witnessed it all. Qingbei said with a shrug of his shoulders, and pointed his finger behind her. Qingyu had not noticed when Qin Fang had come, as she had probably been too focused just now, and her senses had dulled a little. Hence when she turned her head around, she immediately saw that stern face of Qin Fang staring at her, like she was some monster. Like he was thinking just how many kinds of elemental powers she was able to wield, and was also able to circumvent the gift stone's detection. It must be known that the gift stone he possessed in his hands was a lot more accurate than the one in the faint mist sect. Unless her real prowess had already far surpassed the boundaries that the gift stone was able to assess. Chapter 77. 1. Real geniuses really do keep a low profile. He had been thinking before that the two of them looked so very much alike, and it could be seen with just one look that they were a pair of dragon phoenix twins from the same mother. So how could it be possible that the younger brother possessed such heaven-defying gift, while the elder sister was just so ordinary? Never had he thought that the lass was merely just hiding her powers, and had purposely pretended to be inconspicuous, when her gifted talent might just be so much higher than that already prodigious youth. Wouldn't that mean that the constellation lands would soon undergo a tumultuous change? To think that such young children were already so powerful, and possibly unmatched by others. Qin Fang stood still in his spot as he contemplated that fact for a good while before he walked over, with a rather complicated gaze, to look at the slightly embarrassed young lady. He hesitated before he asked, "How many elemental attributes can you wield?" Qingyu blinked her eyes, looking highly innocent, and then replied, "I do not know, elder." Wasn't the gift stone unable to identify it accurately as well? Qin Fang almost vomited out a mouthful of his old blood. You say that the gift stone was unable to identify it? It is clear that it's this little monster, who is intentionally hiding her real strength. I saw that you were able to use gold, fire, and lightning earlier, 3 elements at the same time, and judging from the intensity of the spirit light, they have already been cultivated to reach the higher levels. Qin Fang's eyes were looking at her sharply. You have to be honest with me before I can help you achieve greater advancement based on your real abilities. Qingyu was feeling rather helpless. She wanted to thank the old elder, but she really did not need any help from him. Moreover, the sacred burial arts she was cultivating was not the same as the martial arts in these lands. If she were to cultivate based on Qin Fang's method, it might very well come to contradict and repel what she was practicing. Qing Bei on the side saw that helpless expression on his elder sister's face, and she paused a moment before she said, "Elder, to be entirely honest, Qing Yu had concealed her real strength, because she is afraid people with ill intentions will come to notice her. She will have no problem being accepted into the Faint Mist sect, as besides this, she is also an elixir cultivator." Qin Fang's eyes bulged wide once again. Elixir cultivator? With just those two words, not to mention just being accepted into the Faint Mist sect. If the teachers in there knew this, they would all surely be frantically fighting for her. She was a dual cultivation prodigy, extremely rare to see. Good. Such a rare and promising talent. Qin Fang revealed a rare smile on his face. Looks like the children of the Duke of Eternal Peace are extraordinary indeed. In the near future, you will surely surpass your elder sister and take over her title as the greatest female prodigy. Qing Bei curled up a corner of his lips in disdain. Who cares for that title? If they were really to be compared, Qing Yu would definitely leave Yanning Luo in the dust a few streets behind. Only that woman would care for such self-ingratiating titles. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It seems like the two of you will definitely be getting into the Faint Mist sect. In that case, I will not teach the two of you much, Qin Fang said, nodding his head. But after being accepted into the Faint Mist sect, the sect will send their disciples out on missions. Sometime later, I will make arrangements to send the few of you out for training to acquire some battle experience. But as the cultivation of the other two young misses is really inadequate, we need to wait for a period. Qin Fang shook his head and sighed when he finished, his heart contemplating why there was such a great disparity between people from the same family. But having discovered two such excellent sprouts, Qin Fang's mood improved greatly. He just liked seeing such hardworking and exuberant young people. There was nothing to worry about on this side. He merely reminded the two of them that they were to continue to work hard on their cultivation, and were not to let up before he turned himself around to go see how the sisters, Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu, were doing. Outside, because of the two lightning bolts that struck out of the completely clear skies, it had stirred up quite a big commotion. The Faint Mist sect was respected as the top sect, and the thing they were most well known for was how mysterious they were. Unless someone from within the sect led the way, or no one would be able to find its entrance. Chapter 77. 2. Real geniuses really do keep a low profile. People of the world said that the Faint Mist sect was a place that immortals lived, far above the 9 heavens, beyond the reach of mere mortals. Inside the place were dazzling bejeweled palaces of jade and marble, classy and opulent, too beautiful for words. One would see young men and women elegant as the gods in full white robes everywhere, eating the fruits of immortals and drinking the nectar of the heavens, riding the wind as they moved, living lives that mortals longed for and looked up to. Of course, most of what was said were highly exaggerated, but as the sect was really just too mysterious, and that was why they had been made out to be so dreamy and mystifying, nothing like the mortal realm. But it was true for some parts of the place. The Faint Mist sect was really located in a high geographical location, high above the ground upon the peak of an extremely high mountain. Up in there the clouds swirled, and over the mountain's side hung a rapid and torrential waterfall that was like the silver rivers of the 9 heavens, flowing down unceasingly. And the entrance into the Faint Mist sect was upon that very peak, behind that waterfall. This moment was when the sect's disciples carried out their morning training and sparring. The two loud explosive sounds had not only caused the people to become panicked, even the Faint Mist sect, who was shut out from the world in this place, felt the repercussions. A whole group of elders and teachers were all gathered together to discuss about it, leaving the disciples to gossip and debate, their thoughts running all over the place. In the Faint Mist sect's meeting hall, 6 people sat on each side of the hall, a total of 12. They were the Faint Mist sect's highly senior elders, who had the right to speak and held great authority, with some of them holding positions as senior teachers as well. And the one person seated up on the main seat was a young man who looked to be only about 30 years of age, good-looking and cultured, seemingly highly amiable. Most people would probably not dare to believe that the sect leader of the Faint Mist sect would actually be such a young man. But only these members in their inner circle knew that the gentle and refined look of the man was only a facade. Otherwise, how would he be able to hold down all those old and crafty bunch of hungry wolves so shrewd and subtle seated below? The young man up on the main seat rested his chin in his hand, that was resting on the arm of his chair, and said offhandedly, "Everyone has probably heard the lightning strikes earlier. What do all of you think is the reason?" An old man wearing a long brown robe said after a moment's pause. "From what I think, that was probably the reverberation caused by a wielder of lightning, and he might have been advancing through a level." Advancing through a level? Elder Mo, have your eyes grown blurry with age? That bolt of lightning had clearly been infused with two other elements, with gold and fire. It must have been several highly skilled experts dueling each other. Another younger man said in rebuttal. The bunch of people argued incessantly below with only one exception. He looked not much older than the young man up on the main seat, as he sat there with his brows furrowed together, like he was contemplating on a tough issue. The corners of the young man's lips curled up with an amused smile, and his eyebrow then arched up as he asked, "Elder Yen, do you know what that was?" The man who was called out was taken aback when he heard that, and his brows knitted up even more tightly together. "I have a few ideas about it in mind, but I am thinking that that is just too preposterous. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It wouldn't hurt to speak your mind. You are the only lightning element wielder in here, and you should have the most right to speak about it," the young man said. The others all halted their arguing, and turned to look at Elder Yen. Although Elder Yen was not the oldest among this group of people, but almost everyone in there would not doubt his words. Because not only he was a high-level expert, he was also an oracle very rarely seen. He had helped the sect avoid calamity several times, and he held a very high position among the Faint Mist sect's 12 elders. "What does Elder Yin mean by your words? Could it possibly be an expert from the higher realms?" The young man's smiling demeanor suddenly faded away, before he opened his mouth to ask. Chapter 77. 3. Real geniuses really do keep a low profile. I am merely guessing. But if it's not someone from the higher realms, then if that powerful strike that was infused with 3 element types had not been retracted by the wielder in time, but had allowed the lightning bolts to fall, it would definitely draw down calamity from the heavens upon us. Elder Yin opened his mouth to say slowly, his tone of voice solemn. Even for me who has already cultivated the lightning element to its peak would find it difficult to achieve that, but that person had clearly only used about 3/10 of his powers. Is Elder Yin able to deduce where this person is at? Unfortunately, the other party retracted his powers too quickly, and I was not able to augur his position. Elder Yin said a little regretfully as he shook his head, his eyes darkening. But I can be certain that this person's general location is within the Green Wave Kingdom, that is the closest to the Faint Mist sect. Green Wave Kingdom? The good-looking young man's eyes narrowed up. Isn't the young lass Yen Ning Luo from the Green Wave? Seems like the Green Wave Kingdom is really filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Sect leader, why not let me go investigate into this matter? Elder Yin opened his mouth to ask. The young man curled up his lips and smiled, his beautiful eyes looking highly profound and thoughtful as he stared off into the distance. No need for that. I have a feeling that this person will come to meet with me in the near future. A different feeling from living life on the edge back in cloud heaven for so many years, being able to wake up every morning to hear the hollering voices of the hawkers peddling their wares along the streets. Having been able to regulate and recondition his body's constitution in this low-leveled lands for the past few years, it had caused the flamboyantly tyrannical Lu Junyao to start liking living a peaceful life like this, even though such a kind of life had merely been his way of numbing himself throughout that period. His tall, slender frame stood by the window, his gaze suddenly sharpened, and the aura around his body intensified slightly. And within the perimeter of that slightly spaced-out gaze, a figure had suddenly walked within his sight. She was wearing a simple long white dress. Among 10 people that passed by on the street, about 6 would be wearing white. But it was just this person who made plain white clothes so eye-catching. A head of long hair reaching her waist was loosely held by a hairpin, looking so languid and indifferent. Her long upslanted phoenix-like eyes were alluringly mesmerizing, like they were forever exuding a kind of enchanting aura. Below that perky and high-bridged nose was a set of light pink lips, tinged with a smile just like those eyes, that exquisitely beautiful little face looking just like a seductive little fox. She was clearly a young lady still looking slightly puerile and pure, but her countenance was however so alluring and mesmerizing, that added a sense of maturity to her. Compared to when she had first come out disguised as a young lad, having changed back to women's clothing, her charm seemed to have been raised up to reach another point. "Little brother, give me 2 trays of flavorful crystal buns." Qingyu woke up early, and she had come out for a walk after her morning practice. She had then smelled the fragrance, and thought that the rascal Qing Bei would surely like to have some, so she had come to buy them back for him. This stall selling breakfast was very famous in the imperial capital, and there was always a long snaking queue every day bright and early in the morning. Although its premises were not big, but the cook was great, and the people loved the taste of the stall's food. When Qingyu joined the queue, there were about 10 people in front of her. But all those people had been eager for her to take their spots in the queue. She was just about to refuse politely when all of them quickly went one by one to queue up behind her, where she then became the first person in the queue. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu was speechless. The Green Wave Kingdom's people are really so courteous and considerate. The young assistant who was busy selling the buns had initially been puzzled why everyone had suddenly jumped to the back of the queue, but when he heard such a gentle and pleasing voice, he immediately raised his head up, and very nearly had 2 streams of blood spurting right out from his nose. What a lucky day it is for him, to be able to see such a beautiful young lady so early in the morning. Chapter 78. 1. Teasing to turn out being teased. The bun stall's assistant stared at the young miss, and was mesmerized for a moment, before he immediately packed 2 trays of buns nimbly into a bag, lifting it up with both hands to hand it over to Qingyu. "Miss, please be careful with the buns." "Thanks." Qingyu accepted the buns feeling rather amused, before she pulled out a gold coin from inside her sleeve, and placed it on the table, all prepared to leave. "Hold it, young miss." The young stall assistant called out to her when he saw that, and returned the coin to her. "You've paid too much for the buns, and our shopkeeper said that it's affinity that we came to meet today. So how can he allow a person as beautiful as a goddess to be tainted by material things like money? So these 2 small trays of buns will be a treat from the shopkeeper." She only wanted to buy a few buns. Why does this little lad have so many thoughts about it? Of course she still paid for them in the end, and the young stall assistant then watched her leave with regret in his eyes. Lu Junyao watched the entire comedic scene from beginning to end, with such a nakedly penetrating gaze. How could Qingyu possibly not have noticed it? But as the gathered cloud loft's location was so great, one was able to see many things that happened throughout the entire imperial capital from here. She had coincidentally also brought out the bottle of antidote elixirs she had finished cultivating some time before when she came out today. Lu Junyao then saw the young lady brazenly walking straight towards the gathered cloud loft, and his eyes flashed with a glint. Bai Yen was in the fragrance court right at that moment, and there were only a scattered few people dressed up as waiters to serve any patrons that came in, though it was said they were there to serve patrons. But it was thought that their style of doing that could not be any more strange than any other tea house throughout the whole imperial capital. One person stood guarding the door as he leaned against the doorframe, his eyes staring wide. When people walked up to the place, his eyes did not even blink once, but just stood there unmoving like a rock. Qingyu was feeling rather curious, and she went closer to go take a look, only to hear the sound of even breathing. Asleep? Sleeping with his eyes open? A corner of Qingyu's eye twitched, but she continued walking inside with any change in her demeanor. Upon a table around the corner, a gray-robed person was sprawled over a table sleeping soundly away, and in that large quiet hall, the sound of water dripping could be heard intermittently. Looking more carefully, she then saw that it was from the person who was sleeping so soundly, He did not realize his drool was dripping down. There was a waiter behind the counter who looked somewhat a little more normal. His chin propped up by the palm of one hand while his other hand clicked an abacus in a flurry, at a very fast speed. Qingyu was just about to go forward and ask him something when her expression on her face froze. That person was actually clicking speedily with one hand while asleep, his mouth open and snoring loudly. Qingyu could not find any words to describe the situation. Bright and early in the day, and they are all sleeping so soundly one after another. They could almost be mistaken to be dead. She had already come in here for so long, and not a single one of them has even reacted at all. Fortunately, there wasn't anything of great value in there, or even if people had emptied out the place, none of these fellas would know a thing at all. Come on up, Lu Junyao said, standing at the second floor's railing, as he looked at the exasperated expression on the young lady's face, and he could not help but burst out laughing. Qingyu raised her head up and looked at him suspiciously. Did you make all your subordinates go thieving around the whole of last night? All of them are sleeping just like pigs. Why should I have anything to do with that? Lu Junyao replied, blinking his handsome-looking violet eyes innocently. Maybe it's because they enjoy a more fulfilling nightlife? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew! What a blood-vomiting inducing answer. Qingyu stiffened her lips, and then went upstairs to the second floor to discover that it was completely quiet upstairs, like he was the only person there. She then arched up an eyebrow and asked, "Where's Bai Jiyan?" Those two were always never apart, and she had almost seen the two of them together every single time. Hence, when she discovered that the other one was not here, she could not help but feel a little strange. He's at the back. Chapter 78. 2. Teasing to turn out being teased. The back meant the fragrance court. Qingyu had gone there a few times when she had disguised herself as a boy, and she knew the way in there rather well. Then I'll just wait for him here for a while. He wouldn't take long, would he? Qingyu asked as she sat herself down, conveniently placing the item in her hand upon the table. Lu Junyao's gaze swept over it for a moment. His mind then remembered the scene he just saw and his eyes filled up with mirth. Are you hungry? Seeing his gaze fixed upon the buns she had just bought, Qingyu thought that he was hungry, and she pushed a portion of it over to him. Eat it if you're hungry. I bought 2 portions. The piping hot and exquisitely made crystal buns had a light pink tinge, and Lu Junyao was caught with a rare stunned expression for a moment. Like this was the first time he was encountering such a situation. For me, he must not be blamed for not knowing how to react, as having lived for centuries, no one had ever treated him like this. The willfully arrogant man saw everything in the world to be beneath him, an existence that was worshipped as a god. Who would have thought that he was still human? Who would have thought that he slept and ate just like any other human? Those penetrating eyes immediately seemed to have been possessed right at that instant. Having not seen such an expression that could be termed as foolish on this fella's face before, Qingyu raised her eyes up in surprise and stretched a hand out to wave it before him. Don't tell me you have never seen this before. It hadn't been said, but Lu Junyao, who had abstained from grains for such a long time, no longer found satisfying one's appetite all that attractive anymore, and hence all these things that mortals ate was something he really did not understand completely. Seeing his expression, Qingyu knew that he had definitely not eaten such a thing before, and for just a brief instant, her eyes suddenly flashed with a glint, and an evil idea rose up in her mind. She handed the chopsticks next to the box of food to the man and said with a smile, "Do you want to give it a try? It's really very good." It was probably because the sudden gentle warmth the young lady was showing in that instant that was so alluring, her eyes 2 smiling arcs, transforming into an charmingly naive and pitiful-looking pet fox, that caused Lu Junyao's heart to soften, and failing to notice the crafty mirth hidden beneath those eyes narrowed with smile. He accepted the chopsticks and picked up one of the crystal buns. Looking at it for a moment, and seeing the young lady's earnest and harmless gaze watching him, he brought it to his lips and bit it lightly. Thereafter, something highly comedic then happened. The laughter restrained at the corners of Qingyu's lips could not be held back any further, and she went piffed in a huge burst of laughter. The man's face immediately froze and the expression then cracked and fissured inch by inch, the sparkling bright violet eyes turning dark. The crystal buns had very thin skin and was filled to its brim with fillings, every single one of them plump and fat, the juices thick and abundant. If someone was eating it for the first time without prior experience, they were guaranteed to get the bun's juice squirt and splatter over their faces and clothes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. And although Lu Junyao had merely taken a small apprehensive bite, but he was still caught off guard when then hot juices from the bun sprayed onto his face. The handsome face that was carefully carved and crafted by the gods had oily meat soup juice hanging upon it at that moment, flowing down along the perfect jawline before it dripped off the chin onto the table, looking hilariously funny no matter how one looked at it. The air turned deathly silent. No, besides the young lady's unsuppressible peals of laughter, gasping hard for air to catch her breath. Ha 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 ha. You, wheeze? Don't look at me like that, ha ha ha. Qing Yu was doubled over in laughter as she slumped back in her chair and held her stomach, tears spilling out from the corners of her beautiful eyes. She did not know why herself, but when she saw that haughty demeanor of that man, the thought of playing a prank on him suddenly struck her, and the fact lay before her that the way he looked now was really very funny, seemingly a lot more warm and human. Chapter 78. 3. Teasing to turn out being teased. It was probably because she had not laughed so hard without restraint for such a long time that once it started, she could not stop. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed, but seeing the little fox laughing so happily, he did not feel all that angry, but just curled up the ends of his lips. Making fun of me? Ha ha ha. I didn't. I sincerely wanted to treat you to something nice. Who is making fun of you? The young lady's tear-filled eyes were beautiful and alluring, making his heart itch. Nobody has ever dared to play such a prank on me before. Lu Junyao's voice was deep, his gaze filled with an almost imperceptible darkness. In that case, then I must definitely return the favor. Almost at the same moment that his voice fell, Qing Yu immediately felt that something was not right. Before she could even react, the man had already reached his hand out and firmly restrained her, holding her dainty little chin. With an evil smile that curled his lips, he then stuffed that crystal bun that he had taken a small bite earlier right into her mouth. Because the crystal bun was large and so smooth and slippery, it immediately slid down to the back of her mouth to her throat. Having been stuffed with a crystal bun, so suddenly out of the blue, while she was completely unprepared, it lodged in her throat, and her tiny face quickly turned red. Cough cough cough. Ugh. Cough cough. She had been born with a small and narrow throat, and with it getting blocked up like that, she immediately suffered a nasty bout of coughing, her face turning from red to a greenish purple, which almost frightened Lu Junyao to death. He quickly patted her hard on her back to make her cough out the bun, and the color of her face then turned back to normal. Have some water. Lu Junyao could not be bothered with the oily stains on his face anymore, as he quickly poured out a cup of water for her. Drink it slowly. Qing Yu accepted the cup of water and took a sip, her breath coming back to her. She then looked accusingly at him. You. Cough cough. You're just too petty. Are you trying to murder me? I was nearly killed by you. I was wrong. Lu Junyao said helplessly. Who would have known that you would get choked by a mere bun? So useless. I'm useless. Qing Yu was so angry her eyes widened as she stared at him. She then saw the mess on his face, and her lips then stiffened. Hurry up and wipe off all that stuff on your face. Otherwise you will be laughed at to death by your subordinates when they see it. Then I'll just kill them with a strike before they die from laughter. Lu Junyao said indifferently, before he turned around and went to the other end to tidy himself up. And it was at this interval that Bai Zhiyin came back. When he saw Qing Yu in the room, he was delighted as he asked, "You've come." It was only when he came closer that he saw that there was a box of beautifully tempting crystal buns on the table. He came over and plopped himself down on a chair to ask, "Is this for me? I just remembered that I have not eaten anything yet." Qing Yu had not even been able to stop him in time, when that fella had already made quick work of the 10+ crystal buns, gobbled all up. Never mind. It's good that he finished it anyway. Otherwise Lu Junyao would remember the grudge if he came, and saw those buns again. Waiting till he polished them all off, Qingyu then pulled out a little green porcelain bottle from inside her sleeve. There are 100 antidote pills in here. Based on the price that we agreed on previously, it is 1,000 gold pieces for one. So you will have to give me a total of 100,000 pieces of gold. You can first check the quantity and composition of the pills. They are all of the same specifications from before. The bottle that Qingyu used to store the pills was actually more than it looked to be. Seemingly merely only about the size of a baby's fist. It was however able to store so many pills, as it seemed like there was a mini dimension inside the bottle. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU by Ji Yen took the bottle and said with a smile, "I will naturally trust what you say." As he spoke, he handed a fiery red jade ring to her. This is a storage ring, and there is 200,000 gold pieces in there. What are you doing here? Qingyu asked with an eyebrow raised. Bai Jiyan then replied with a wide smile. It is naturally to facilitate our long-term cooperation, and a show of my sincerity. Chapter 79. 1. The mysterious azure is seen. In that case, I will accept it then. Qingyu did not say much, but accepted the ring. Bai Jiyan looked at her and suddenly said with a smile, I heard that you are going to that whatever faint mist sect? How did you know? What do I not know of in these lands? Do you think my fragrance court is open for nothing? Bai Jiyan replied with a smug look on his face, looking like that was the most natural thing in the world. How overly confident he is. I'll say, wouldn't it be much better if you follow us back to Cloud Heaven instead? You'll get much better resources there. So what are you going to that faint mist sect for? With your powers, do you even need to go in there to cultivate at all? Bai Jiyan still could not give up trying to poach her over to their side, not willing to give up on any chance he had. Hearing that, Qingyu looked at him expressionlessly and replied, The higher level realms are so brutal, with endless killing and chaotic fighting every day. If I go back with you people, with my current level of power, I will be sending myself to my own doom. If it wasn't for the fact that Cloud Heaven was too chaotic, would you people need to hide here and not return back there? What a pointed and prophetic statement. This little lass mind is just too incisive and sharp. Just as they were talking, Lu Junyao then came in from outside. Detecting the strange atmosphere in the room, he could not help but raise up an eyebrow and asked in puzzlement, What were you talking about? Bai Jiyan turned his head and looked at him appraisingly. Where did you go? Lu Junyao turned his gaze on the culprit and did not answer him, but came to realize that the box of crystal buns was now empty. The expression on his face suddenly changed, and he asked emotionlessly, You ate them? Bai Jiyan felt that the question he asked was a little senseless, but he did not suspect anything as he replied, That's right. I was hungry and I ate them all. Didn't Qingyu bring it here for me? Upon saying that, he then looking in askance towards the young lady opposite him, and the latter blinked her eyes innocently at him. That was mine. Lu Junyao was looking at him without any emotion on his face, the expression strangely terrifying. Bai Jiyan immediately felt that he was losing face here, and his devilishly good-looking plum blossom eyes then had flames sparking within. What? We've been brothers who went through thick and thin for so many years. Can't I even eat a couple of buns from you? It's 11 of them. Lu Junyao corrected him with a deadpan face. There were 12 in total in that box, and one had been wasted by those two earlier with the rest now in Bai Jiyan's tummy. In reality it was really nothing for Bai Jiyan to help himself to just a few buns. But as it was the first time the little fox was giving him something as a gift, though it was just a box of buns, the meaning of those buns was extraordinary. How could he allow Bai Jiyan to eat them all just like that? Though Lu Junyao was not aware at this moment why he was even feeling happy just because Qingyu had casually given him a box of buns. Lu Junyao, let me tell you that I have been tolerating you for a very long time. If you continue to treat me so coldly, and be so heartless, we cannot remain brothers anymore. Bai Jiyan exploded, spitting his words out through gritted teeth. Qingyu at the side did not know what to say. What is happening here? turning upon each other over a box of buns? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Isn't it just too ridiculous? She looked on helplessly at the two men with swords drawn in their eyes and she began to say, "Here. I have another box. If either of you want, just take it." "I only want the previous box," Lu Junyao said stubbornly. "Sheesh. Who cares for those few measly buns of yours? Do you want me to vomit them out and return them to you?" Bai Ziyan retorted, purposely saying it in a disgusting manner. Chapter 79. 2. The mysterious Azura scene vomit. Vomit it out now. Things that belong to me. Even in death. I do not want it to die inside your stomach. What a great classic example of an idiosyncratic couple who loved and hated each other at the same time. It was feared that it might not be suitable for her to remain there further. If she stayed any longer, she might find out more of the two men's love-hate relationship, and would have to be silenced sooner or later. "You guys can carry on. I'll make a move first," Qingyu said indifferently, and picked up the box of buns that had been despised by the two men before she slowly walked out from there. Before she left, she saw that the few people downstairs were still deeply unconscious, all sound asleep. It was probably because the atmosphere was just too strange, as there still wasn't a single customer. What a bunch of strange and eccentric people. She had, however, not noticed that after she walked a good distance away, the man at the door sleeping with his eyes open, and who had not shown the slightest reaction from beginning to end, suddenly swiveled his eyes as he muttered thoughtfully to himself. Just who could this last be? Her relationship with the Lord is definitely not ordinary. It is said that she is the Lord's benefactor who saved his life. The higher-ups have given instructions that she is a person we must not offend. The fellow behind the counter was still clicking the abacus in a flurry, his head not lifting up at all as he spoke. The whole scene in there had changed so very quickly that it seemed the person who had been unconscious and snoring loudly just a moment ago was not him at all. "You both know nothing at all." The man sprawled over the table had probably slept the most comfortably. He was rubbing his still groggy eyes as he wiped off the suspicious wet stains from the corner of his mouth, and he then gave a big lazy yawn. If Qingyu had been there, she would surely have recognized that this man was the same gray-robed man who had rescued her from the barricaded spirit tower. When the two other men heard that, they quickly came awake, both of them highly taken aback. "This isn't just any ordinary benefactor, you know." His tone of voice was heavy with profound meaning. "What do you mean? You wouldn't understand even if I tell you," the gray-robed man said with contempt in his eyes, and he then gave another sleepy yawn. "Don't disturb me. Let me continue to catch up with sleep." Did this scoundrel not sleep at all in his previous life? 24s in a day, and he sleeps for 20 hours. Spends 2 more hours eating, and the last 2 hours remaining half awake and groggy. He's really one of a kind. Qingyu brought back the still warm crystal buns for Qing Bei. Having not gone out from the manor for so many years, he seldom saw the kind of snacks being sold outside. He was after all still a child, and it was bought for him by his favorite elder sister. Hence he had naturally been highly delighted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ever since Qin Feng knew of the gifted talents they possessed, he was very relaxed with them, but would still come check on their progress every few days. In contrast, he watched Yin Shiru and Yin Shiwu very strictly. Yin Shiwu endured it silently, and she was doing all right, while Yin Shiru was wailing incessantly in complaint about how tough it was. She had after all been pampered and spoilt from a young age, and had never encountered such suffering. Even going back to complain to her royal concubine mother did not help, as it was a direct order given by Yin Su himself, so no one was able to interfere. Moreover, her mother also had to tolerate the Duchess Emo Han Yan's sarcastic ridicule, and she had her hands tied. On the other side, Qingyu returned to her room, and was just going to flip through the Heavenly Insights of Medicine to have a look at the poison volume and the medicine volume. In regards to her martial arts, because her weapon spirit Zongmai had regained consciousness, her cultivation had been greatly accelerated, without having to share her excess energy to nourish her weapon spirit. Now she needed to improve and sharpen her skills in medicine at the same time, though she did not know what level she was at herself at this moment. Chapter 79. 3. The mysterious Azure is seen sitting with her legs crossed on the bed. She had just entered her sea of consciousness when a shot of pain hit her in the brain for a moment. Qingyu knitted up her brows, and she pressed a finger between her brows to massage it. What happened there? She had not overtired herself, so why had she felt like that? Fortunately, the pain had disappeared in an instant. But just as she was not paying attention to it, a terrible and blood-filled scene from Azura's hell flashed before her eyes. Within an enormous array of stars, a man and a woman were locked in a tight embrace, their clothes stained with bright red blood. The man's hand was gripped around the sharp blade thrusting towards his body, which shielded the woman completely, but the dagger in the woman's hand stabbed deeply into the man's chest. Qingyu's eyes flared open, and her long, slightly upslanted eyes were bright red, looking highly terrifying. A golden light appeared at the side, and the golden-haired youth suddenly appeared where he then immediately pressed his finger lightly upon her forehead in between her brows. Qingyu instantly fell limp, and her body slumped into a heap on the bed. Mistress, are you all right? Zhongmai asked worriedly, as he plopped himself down beside the bed. What just happened to me? Qingyu's brows were furrowed up as she brought her palm up to feel her forehead, and found that it was covered in a layer of cold sweat. Your soul seemed to have been drawn into Azura's hell, that was filled with intense murderous intent. If I had not brought you back out in time, you will surely have been overwhelmed by that intensive murderous intent and kill every person you see. Zhongmai said rather trepidly, his heart still unsettled. Azura's hell. What is that? Azura's hell is a kind of dimensional space formed by the immense mind power, left behind by a powerful pugilist with profound cultivation. And because of the heavy blood and slaughter involved, it is named as Azura's hell. Qingyu suddenly fell silent. She thought back to the scene she had just witnessed, with two people in it, a man and a woman. It did not seem like this was the first time she had seen such a scene. There was another time she came to recall. It was during those few days that she had been unconscious from the barricaded spirit tower. She was locked within a space, and she was not able to remember clearly what had happened. The only thing she could recall was that the sky was red, the sun was red, and the dark crows were also red. A whole large flock of red dark crows that exuded an aura of death cawed incessantly in the sky, their calls shrill and piercing to the ears, like they were mourning for all the people who were about to die. She remembered that woman, the woman whose face she could not see clearly had parted her red lips, and said to her a single word, sorry. She had said sorry. Qingyu had probably not noticed it herself. Her eyes had grown red-rimmed, and a single tear fell from the corner of her eye. The golden-haired youth became frantic with terror, almost bursting into tears himself. Mistress, what is wrong? Where is it hurting? Don't cry. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The mistress that Zhongmai had seen had never once shed a tear in weakness, no matter how difficult the situation became. It could even be said that his mistress was someone who did not know what cry was at all. This was the first time he saw a tear fall from her eyes, and Zhongmai was suddenly unconsciously feeling helplessly frantic. Hearing the youth's worried and flustered voice, Qingyu snapped back to her senses. What? Am I crying? She raised a hand up to wipe at her eyes, and discovered that her eyes were wet. She was stunned for a moment as well. She did not know why when she thought of that woman in her dream, with that pitiful smile on the corners of her lips, and that one word she spoke saying sorry, had made her heart wrench up with an unspeakable pain for an instant, unexpectedly causing her tears to fall unconsciously. Little burrow, why am I seeing such strange scenes? I have never even seen those places before. Qingyu asked softly, as she looked at the wet tear stains on the back of her hand. Chapter 79. 4. The mysterious Azure scene. Zhongmai took a deep pause, and then said, I think that it probably has something to do with this body mistress has been reborn into. Qingyu was startled and she went on to say, Are you saying it's a memory from this body? That's right, There is a very great possibility that is the case. She had heard it from Qing Bei before. It seemed like they were not Yen Su's biological children. Before their mother had married Yen Su, she was already with child. On one hand, Yen Su had developed feelings towards their mother, and on the other hand, it was to repay the benevolence their mother had shown to him in the past, seeking to protect them. Then, what was their mother's real identity? Could it be possible that she really was linked to the cloud heaven in some way? Bright Moon Divine Temple. Within the pitch-black darkness that had a countless number of spirit tablets hanging in the air, it was not known from when a faint red light had started to glow, its color growing deeper, turning a deep red like blood seeping out. The woman below looked as if she could see the painful struggle inside. Her elegant lips turned up slightly in a faint smile, her voice soft, like the slightest breeze would disperse it, and it was not known whether she was talking to herself or saying it to another person. If you knew this day would come, why did you do that back then? All the pain and suffering you are feeling now, who would even know? The person at the side then came forward to say in a low voice. Her spirit body seems to have begun to be able to gain awareness. I believe that it will not be long before she will regain her consciousness. The woman, however, laughed and shook her head. This is still far from enough. She is still missing a small half of her spirit out there in the world. If the spirit is unable to join back together, whether she will regain her consciousness is still hard to say. Temple Lord, are you really going to have her resurrected? Heh. The woman laughed suddenly. She has to suffer a little, or she will never learn from it. I've already told her that things like love and affection must never be touched, never ever. But she had insisted on breaking the taboo, and ended up meeting such a wretched end. Speaking of that, the woman then said a little self-mockingly, but since time began, who was really able to fully escape from its curse? When the news that the Dark Legions were recruiting elixir cultivators was released, the entire cloud heaven was collectively taken aback. What kind of insidious plans does this bunch of devilish and unorthodox infidels have up their sleeves this time? They are actually trying to recruit elixir cultivators into their midst? It must be known that every one of their members all possessed extraordinary skills. The paths they took in their cultivation, unlike the ways the rest of the entire cloud heaven practiced. Hence, no other place was shrouded in thicker mystery than them, with no one able to properly grasp their form of martial arts, which caused everyone else to be at a disadvantage when trading blows. If they allowed powerful elixir cultivators to join them, then how unbelievable is the Dark Legions going to become? Wouldn't they reign and run amok in tyranny throughout the entire cloud heaven? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Although the divine healers were not so adverse against the people from the Dark Legions, due to the relationship between Bai Ji Yan and Lu Junyao, but they were after all people who helped the dead and saved the wounded, warriors who stood for righteousness. With their ancestors' teachings placed before them, they issued strict orders that forbade them from having any dealings with people from the Dark Legions, and anyone who disobeyed would be thrown out of the divine healer sect. Hence, although there was a reason why Bai Ji Yan did it, but he had still gone against the divine healer sect's rules, so to the outside world, he had announced that he was no longer the divine healer sect's young chief. The great family clan, that had been handed down over for the past several hundred years, must not be suffer the slightest taint to its name. Although the divine healer sect had already announced that there would not be able of their disciples taking part in the recruitment, but there were still many scattered elixir cultivators, who roamed the realm, that liked their willful and unrestrained ways, who came in free from any factions or entities. In an instant, the numbers of the Dark Legions suddenly strengthened by quite a bit. Chapter 80. 1. Changes just before parting. Sometimes having great numbers can also be rather frustrating. Most of the people were ones who fervently worshipped the great name, the Dark Lord of the Dark Legions, Lu Junyao. Hence, once they joined, they all started to request an audience, but the problem was that Lu Junyao himself was not in the Dark Regions at that moment, and they could only make all kinds of excuses to reject them. What are we going to do? Should we get the Lord to come back and hold down the fort with his presence? Sun Luo opened his mouth to suggest when he saw that things were spinning out of control. Meiji shot him a glance. And you think you have what it takes to get the Lord to come back? With the suave manner the Lord had left on the trip this time, it could be seen that he would not be coming back anytime soon, and Meiji was not holding any hope in that happening. But we can't just continue to dangle all those people. If they come to discover that the Lord isn't in cloud heaven, and start to have a change of heart, there will then be trouble. Sun Luo said in exasperation. The scholarly and refined-looking man then said slowly. Among the batch of elixir cultivators, we do not know how many of them possess real skills. Unfortunately, Bai Ji Yin isn't around as well, or he would be able to tell immediately. Just as the two of them were jabbering back and forth in conversation, a clear and melodious male voice sounded. The voice was clearly not loud, but it immediately made both of them become quiet. I still have one pill of those elixirs left over from before. Let all the elixir cultivators cultivate the exact same elixir, and only the one who extracts the purest essence can remain. The person who spoke was dressed in a full white robe, a man who possessed a gentle and elegant countenance with red eyes, the one called Little Monster by their internal members. Once those words of his sounded, the eyes of the two people lit up. Great idea. Little Monster, that brain of yours is really so useful. Of course, don't you see who his family is? Meiji snorted smugly, the expression on his face filled with pride. After the white-robed man with red eyes finished what he came to say, he then stood up and walked out, and Meiji followed right behind him. Haha, that Meiji has really been twisted around that guy's little finger. Sun Luo said teasingly. The scholarly man then replied like he had become so used to it. She has just become too accustomed to being haughty, and having met Little Monster, who is even more arrogant than she is, she would naturally have no choice but to submit. What you said sounds very reasonable. Sun Luo nodded his head as he commented. Water Edge Kingdom Imperial Palace. It had been several dozen days since Qing Yi Li and his delegation had returned to the kingdom, and having taken medicinal herb baths, and given elixirs daily over this short period of time, Yu Muchen had started feeling that his body was feeling somewhat different in several places. On this day, after Yu Muchen dismissed the imperial court, he stayed inside his own bedchambers to look through the letters and memorials sent in over the past few days. Yu Xinyin had coincidentally come over to look for him, the light patter of her footsteps closing in from afar where the doors were then pushed open. Royal brother, what are you doing now? Yu Muchen lifted his eyes up feeling a little surprised. Why are you so free to come all the way to my place? He did not know where the lass heard the news from that the three great sects would be recruiting new disciples in half a year's time. She already had enough of sparring with people in the Water Edge Kingdom, and she was insisting that she wanted to go participate in the trials. She was the only sibling born from the same parents, and he had naturally indulged her a lot, allowing her to always have her way with everything. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But she had been going to the military barracks to get the guards to spar with her in order to increase her chances of passing the tryouts. And in regards to that, it had been just too bitter for words for everyone. Haven't I not seen my royal brother for several days already? So I came over specially just to see you. Yu Xinyin said, looking every inch an obedient child. But she then suddenly leaned over close, her beautiful blue eyes staring wide like she had spotted something surprising. What? There is something on my face? Yu Muchen asked as he raised his hand up to touch his face. Yu Xinyin shook her head with her face still looking incredulous. Royal brother, why do I feel that having not seen you for the past few days, you seem to be a lot more energetic? Chapter 82. Changes just before parting because of his body's frailty. Though Yu Muchen's body still wasn't all that skinny, his complexion was always tinged with a pale sickly pallor, looking like the slightest gust of wind might just blow him down. But coming closer to look at him carefully, she could actually see that there was now a tinge of rosiness of health in his cheeks. Hearing her say that, Yu Muchen was taken aback a moment. Is that so? I had not really noticed it. though I am really feeling as if my body does not feel as weak and lethargic as before. And I do not lose my breath as easily as before. Really? Yuxian Yin said, her face beaming with delight. Has my royal brother's health improved? And you will not cough out blood and fall unconscious out of the blue anymore? Mentioning about coughing out blood, he had indeed not encountered that for more than 10 days already. In the past he would at most be able to last 3 days, before he would be hit with an insufferable bout of wrecking cough, that felt like it would take his life away from him. Now he had actually gone through about 10 days without it coming back, and that was just too unbelievable. Yuxian Yan's blue eyes were sparkling brightly. So that young lady really has such adept skills in medicine, and is really able to cure my royal brother's condition. Young lady? Chen was startled. That's right. It's the very same young lady that big brother Yili has always been searching for. Yuxian Yin said. But, she looks so very young, about the same age as me. But her skills in medicine is as good as that of an elder who has lived for several decades. It seems like she is extraordinarily gifted, and it's little wonder that big brother Yili values her so much. About the same age as you? Chen's eyes flashed with surprise. Then, when did she and Qing Yili come to know each other? If they knew each other more than 10 years ago, that young lady might have just been born. So how did she come to know him? I am not very clear on that, but back when they met each other in the Green Wave Kingdom, they seemed to have recognized each other at first glance. Yuxian Yin said slowly. Chen seemed to have thought of something, and the expression on his face changed slightly for a brief moment, before it recovered quickly. There seemed to be something illogical in all of this. But looking at the situation, with Qing Yili about to leave the water edge, even if there was anything illogical about it, it did not seem to matter. After the All Saints' Day festival was over, and the curtains fell, the city was restored back to its original look. After the engagement between Xianyuan and Yenning Luo was annulled, the Green Wave Emperor continued to have a thorn stuck prickly in his heart. It was clear that it was to have been a great union, but those two people had been unwilling, to which then broke it all up. Yenning Luo, who was born with the birth characteristics of the phoenix, and destined to be an empress. The man to marry her would definitely achieve greatness, but a pity that this phoenix was no longer to belong to the Xianyuan family anymore. Xianyuan had stayed in the imperial capital for such a long period, and he was about to embark on his journey back to the Faint Mist sect. He had been with the Faint Mist sect for 6 years, and in another 4 years, he would be able to leave the sect, and choose to come back, to continue living as the noble crown prince, or choose to go out, and accomplish great achievements for himself. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. As the Green Wave Emperor was still young, there was hurry for him to come back to inherit the throne, so Xianyuan still had the freedom to choose. You are leaving already? 3 people were gathered in a winehouse, and hearing Xianyuan words, Yu Jingzhu raised his cup to say, Come my brother, let me offer you a toast to wish you a smooth journey. Upon saying that, he immediately downed the cup of wine with a tilt of his head back. Although he was also a member of the Faint Mist sect, he was very relaxed towards the rules and regulations of the sect. Because he was a member of the Faint Mist sect that was specifically responsible for gathering intelligence, he was usually roaming outside most of the time, and seldom returned to the sect. And it was because he was really capable that the sect was a lot more lenient with him. Chapter 83. Changes. Just before parting, Xianyuan then did as he said, and clinked his cup against Yu Jingzhua's, and downed his drink as well. Mo Fei Ran shook her head and laughed. Why the somber mood as you drink? It's not as if you're parting between life and death, so why are you being so dramatic? Xianyuan snorted lightly. Though we're not separated by life and death, but after I return to the sect, I fear that I will not escape hearing endless gossip and whispered murmurings. Mo Fei Ran was taken aback a moment, but he quickly recomposed himself. You mean the matter about your engagement with Yenning Luo being called off? What else? People out there probably already know all about it. At the end of the All Saints' Day festival, Yenning Luo had suggested to annul the marriage right before so many people. Sigh. Those who are not aware, they might think that I, as the crown prince of a kingdom, is just a great bully who has been maliciously ill-treating her. Xian Yuanche said, his words dripping with sarcasm. Mo Fei Ran's youngest aunt was the Yen Ning Luo's mother, and the young lady could be considered to be his cousin. Upon hearing Xian Yuanche's words, he was somehow feeling a little awkward, and did not know what to say. And Xian Yuanche had most probably had a little too much to drink, and he was a little more talkative. But how would all those people know the truth? Ha ha ha. She called off the engagement with me not because we did not see eye to eye with each other, nor was it for any other ridiculous reason, but because she had come to fall in love with another man. Mo Fei Ran, do you know who that man is? He is ha ha ha. He is the man who is ashamed to have anyone see his face, and wears a mask perpetually, the Duke of Vast Seas. Once those words came out, the expression on Mo Fei Ran's face froze completely, thinking whether his ears had been hearing things. What is the crown prince saying? The person Ning Luo likes is the Duke of Vast Seas. The wine cup held in Yu Jingzhua's hand spilled a little wine out, like he had been rather surprised. And Xian Yuanche was continuing to say, "You guys don't believe me? Yen Ning Luo told me that herself that she had liked that man since she was very young. Huh, the greatest prodigy. Her taste is indeed different from others." Yen Ning Luo liked the Duke of Vast Seas, and the one the Duke of Vast Seas liked was her real sister. Seeing the Duke of Vast Seas' expression and demeanor that day, it was clear that he liked and cared for that young lady a lot. Yu Jingzhua's mouth opened in mocking laughter. What a complicated relationship. The way was bright and well lit with lanterns till they came outside as they stepped out from the wine house, about to split up and go their separate ways. Several cold gusts of sinister breeze blew past suddenly. Yu Jingzhua had drunk the most among them, but was the sober one. Because he was drank all the time, he had built up a strong resistance against wine. The gusts of sinister winds blew over them, and he subconsciously raised his head up to look, where he came to see the black shadows flying past. The reactions of Xian Yuanche and Mo Fei Ran were slightly slower, but they had also noticed the presence of those black shadows, which caused them to sober up by half. Who were those people? Mo Fei Ran asked in a low voice. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It seems to be assassins from the Carefree Valley. Yu Jingzhua said with his eyes narrowed cautiously. Xian Yuanche then said indifferently, "Let's go. Let's mind our own business." Upon saying that, he raised his foot, and was about to take a step to go on his own way. The Carefree Valley's assassins were not that rare to see as their members were spread throughout every corner of the Constellation lands. Although they cushioned at the bottom among the three great sects, their scale was the most widespread. Their members could be often seen appearing in the night, as the assassins depended on carrying out spying and assassination missions to earn their keep. The few of them had not thought too much about it, and they had not left for long when Xian Yuanche's footsteps suddenly halted, the expression on his face changing. Chapter 81. 1. Set up for a fleeting moment, he seemed to have heard a familiar voice, and he did not know whether it was because he had drunk too much which was making him hear things. It was only till Mo Fei Ran called out to him from behind that he returned to his senses. "It's nothing, go on and leave." And at that same moment, in a dense forest about 100 miles away from the imperial capital, a slender-bodied shadow in front finally came to a stop. His brows creased up as he stared ahead of him, seemingly rather frustrated. He was rather familiar with this place, but it was exactly because he knew this place well that he knew he must stop, and not go any deeper inside. This stretch of forest had become mystifying boglands, and although he was surrounded trees that stretched further than the eye could see, once one reached the center region, it became a place filled with poisonous obstacles, and the land below one's feet would suddenly turn to bogs. If one was not careful, and came to step into the boglands, then it would be hopeless no matter whether one called out to the heavens or to earth. At the moment that he hesitated, the sound of swishes broke through the air and several black shadows then appeared within the dense forest. "Mu Qi, we do not have any bad intentions, and merely want to ask young Miss Mu to come out to help us with a favor." The leader was a tall-framed man who stepped forward. He looked to be about 27 or 28 years of age, and was rather stalwart-looking, seemingly a candid and straightforward man. The Carefree Valley's Assassins Alliance could be found in all corners of the Constellation Lands, and they were all dressed fully in black, their faces covered with a malevolent demon mask. This was to prevent themselves from being identified, and the most famous ones among them all in the Carefree Valley were the mysterious and highly elusive 10 Great Assassins. The assassins were classified in 3 levels as Heaven, Mystical, and Yellow. Above the Heaven level were the Gold Medal Assassins, who possessed even more terrifying powers. It was said that to employ a Gold Medal Assassin to carry out a mission, the price would not be lower than 10,000 gold, and it could well be imagined just how rare Gold Medal Assassins were. And the 10 Great Assassins were ranked even above the Gold Medal Assassins. They were part of the Carefree Valley's might, but was also an independent body of people, establishing an assassination temple within the valley. It was said that these 10 people were the Carefree Valley's trump card, and they were so mysterious that no one knew anything about them. The only thing that was known was that the 10 Great Assassins were an highly unconventional bunch of people in the Carefree Valley, as they would never hide their faces or aura. That was because no one had ever survived under their hands. And before his eyes, the group of about 6 or 7 people were all uniformly clothed in black, and a demon mask except for the man leading them, who did not cover his face in any way, which undoubtedly meant that he was one of the 10 Great Assassins. Wuxia sighed inwardly at his bad luck today. He had just come out from the Mu Manor, when he'd been marked by this bunch of guys. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although he possessed rather great skills himself, but with so many people to attack him from all sides, and they also had such a legendary grade killer with them, the slightest offense taken with a misplaced word might very well cost him his life here. He silently considered his current circumstances, and then opened his mouth to ask, "If you are looking for my elder sister, shouldn't you go look for her in the Mu Manor? What is the meaning of pursuing me so relentlessly like this? Could that demoness Mu Lai have somehow come to antagonize such a bunch of people in the past? With that tyrannical and aggressive character of hers, who considered herself above everyone, she just very well might have come to have offended other people." The tall-framed man then laughed softly and said, "Though the Carefree Valley and the Limitless Sect could be considered to share rather friendly relations, but since you are close to young Miss Mu, she would naturally agree to it if you plead with her on our behalf. If we do it ourselves, I fear that if negotiations turn sour, we would have to do it the hard way." The man opened his mouth to explain patiently, his gentle and polite personality, one that you would never expect to belong to a cruel and bloodthirsty killer. Chapter 81. 2. Set up Wuxia's brows furrowed together. What can she help the Carefree Valley with? Besides being a little more skilled in medicine, there is nothing much else. He suddenly seemed to have realized something as his words trailed off, looking a little surprised. "That's right. It's exactly because she is skilled in medicine. One of our brothers was afflicted with a strange poison several months ago, and he is now in a critical state. And throughout the entire lands, only the Mu family will be able to save him if you will lend a hand." The man's voice was sincere. "If you are willing to help invite young Miss Mu to step forward, the Carefree Valley's Assassination Temple will then owe you people a debt of benevolence. No matter what kind of request you might make of us, as long as you say it, it will be accomplished." "Strange poison?" Wuxia was taken aback before he said, "Since it's such a strange poison, then it must be rarely seen and hard to cure completely. Although my elder sister is the most proficient in medicine within the Mu family, I do not dare make any decisions I am not confident of on her behalf. If it turns out that she is unable to cure that person, wouldn't all of you then turn your anger onto her instead? You can very well rest assured on that. Although we are all killers, but it does not mean we cannot discriminate between right from wrong. In that case, I will make a trip back to the Mu family tomorrow and ask my elder sister's opinion on it." Wuxia thought that he should at least tentatively agree to their requests first, or they would not let the matter rest. Moreover, he might very well gain by having them owe him a favor, although all this was just a plan made up out of convenience, due to the current circumstances. Hearing that, the man standing right across from him clasped his hand over his fist and said, "The condition of that brother of ours cannot afford to be delayed any further. Better go ask young Miss Mu tonight instead." About that, if he were to interrupt Mu Kai while she was sleeping, she would surely fly into a rage. But he had no other choice but to plunge headlong into it. She couldn't possibly disregard the fact that his life was at risk here, could she? That morning in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, something big happened. While Yen Su and the Duchess were having their breakfast, a servant maid suddenly came running in from outside, her clothes in a highly disheveled state. She fell heavily to her knees on the ground limply, as she raised her tear-streaked face up. "Your Highness, Duchess, please help your servant address her grievance." Emo Han Yan's expression suddenly stiffened, and she then said in a highly displeased tone, "Impudent lowly servant, who let you come in to disturb His Highness' meal?" The servant girl was startled and scared as she went on to say in a sobbing voice, "Duchess, please forgive my impudence. You servant really has no other choice." Yen Su looked at her torn and broken clothes, the bare skin that was exposed filled with green and blue bruises. It could immediately be seen what had happened to her with just one look, and Yen Su paused a moment before he put down his chopsticks. "What actually happened? Your servant brought the medicinal brew that was prepared for the second young master over last night, and the second young master suddenly wrapped his arms around your servant tightly, like he has lost his mind, pulling and tearing at your servant's clothes. Your servant struggled with all her might and begged for mercy, but second master he had not only ignored my words." The servant lass wept as she spoke, even sobbing spasmodically at the end before she then said, pausing at every word, "He went on to violate your servant's body, tormenting your servant for the whole night. It was until just now that your servant was finally able to escape after seeing that he has fallen asleep." Hearing the little lass relate a whole series of events, Yen Su and Emo Han Yin looked completely shocked, like they would never have thought that such a thing could possibly happen. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Emo Han Yin was the one who came to react first, her eyes growing wide and round with rage. "That little beast. He's just too much. To think that he has committed such a heinous scandal. I beg for the Duchess to seek redress for me." Seeing the way Emo Han Yin looked, the young servant cried even more sadly. Yen Su, however, looked at Emo Han Yin and said, "Before the matter is looked into clearly, do not make any hasty judgment. He would never believe it no matter what." He had heard from the old elder Qin Fong several times in the past few days that the child Qing Bei possessed astounding gift, and in days to come he will not lose out to little Ning. He had been thinking that if the child could stand up before the deadline was up, just how great would that be? Chapter 81. 3. Set up at such a critical juncture. How could something like this happen? He was such a clean-looking youth with pure and honest eyes. It was not possible that he could possibly be tainted by such an abhorrible incident in the slightest. With that thought in mind, Yen Su's face darkened further. "You have to think it through clearly before you speak. Just how big a crime it is to besmirch your young master's name. A lowly servant girl like you will not be able to shoulder the consequences. Tell me truthfully, what really happened? Your servant does not dare to lie. Second young master has really violated your servant's body." The young servant girl was gasping in between sobs, looking highly aggrieved and pitiful. "Is your highness trying to cover up for him?" Han Emo Yin said with a laugh when she saw that. "Although he is your highness' son, but he had come to do something so despicable. The servant girl would have been seen by quite a number of people on her way here, and it will not do the Eternal Peace Duke Manor's reputation any good if news of this leak out. This duke will naturally know that." Yen Su said coldly, "Guards, go to the tranquil abode, and bring the second young master to me." "Yes, your highness," a young guard outside the door acknowledged, before he disappeared from his spot in an instant. And it was at a time that Qing Yu did not come home for the entire night. because Qing Fong had been telling them for the past few days that he was making arrangements to send them out for training in order to enhance their survival skills. As after they are admitted into the sect, they would not face a lack of such similar missions, often needing them to sleep and eat in the wild, requiring them to be able to live for a period out in the wilderness. Such an experience would be something they need. After ascertaining the location, in order to prevent any unexpected mishaps, Qing Yu had gone to survey the terrain, and also to spend one night there. Besides encountering snakes, bugs, and wild beasts, she did not find anything out of the ordinary. But upon her return to the tranquil abode, she came to discover two servant girls pacing nervously in front of the door, occasionally poking their heads out to look around outside. She immediately felt that something was not right, and she immediately took a few steps to go inside. "What is going on?" "Sixth young miss. You've finally come back. Second young master is in trouble," an adorable round-faced little servant girl said with red-rimmed eyes. Qian Qian came running out from the second young master's room this morning with her clothes all disheveled, and a while after that, second young master was taken away by His Highness men. Among the servant girls that Yen Su sent over to serve, Qian Qian was the prettiest-looking one. Damn it! She had been too careless. That woman had been so peaceful for such a long time, and she had to come up with such a lousy scheme, just when little Bei's talents were starting to show. Does that woman really think that I am just a soft persimmon to be kneaded and manipulated as she liked? She had not wanted to waste her time and energy with such an undesirable character before, but she had now crossed the line. This time, even if that woman does not die, she'll at least scrape off a few layers of her skin. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU seated within the main hall at that moment were Yen Su, Emo Han Yen, and Yen Shicheng who had been summoned. There were also the whole group of the other women who filled up the hall. The young servant girl in broken and shredded clothes was on the floor, and the depressed-looking youth was seated in his wheelchair, his eyes seemingly rather dazed. With Qing Bei so weak and frail, how could he possibly be capable of doing such a thing? Yen Shicheng said as he looked at the youth on the wheelchair, his brows furrowed up in doubt. Emo Han Yin glared at him. Qing would the servant girl really have the audacity to slander her young master? But Qing Bei is someone who is physically handicapped. How could he possibly be able to inflict such brutal violence on a servant girl who has perfect use of all her limbs? Yen Shicheng knew that his mother had never liked the people in the tranquil abode. How could a matter like this be pushed onto a youth who had not even reached marriageable age? Chapter 82. 1. All full of holes, our air. Men are born stronger than women, and if they really want to do something, how can a woman possibly be able to resist at all? The one who said this was a lady who was brought into the family right after one other royal concubine, but was a voluptuous lady without much of a brain. Once those words came out, Yen Shicheng immediately glared fiercely at her, which cowered her into clamping her mouth shut in an instant. Yen Su had not spoken a word all this time, but just knitted up his brows, his face looking dark and imposing. The youth on the wheelchair seemed so dispirited and weakened now, like he was suffering from the after effects of having overindulged in debauchery. He did not want to believe, but the facts lay before his eyes, which gave him no choice but to see and believe. He had held great hope on the boy, doing all that he could to heal the boy's legs, that would allow him to go into the Faint Mist sect to learn cultivation and secure a great future for himself. Everything had been moving in such a great direction, and he had always been rather satisfied with the child. But looking at the situation, was this a case of his real nature finally becoming revealed? Forgetting himself in his newfound talents? Maybe deep in his bones, he was an extremely at such a young age, and he had committed such a despicable deed. What kind of a scene would it be when he grew up in the future? In those few short moments, Yen Su's heart had already undergone a series of tumultuous changes, his piercing eyes tinted with the color of disappointment. His voice calm, he then said, "Qing Bei, if you do not speak up, you are silently admitting to it. Did you violate this young lass here yesterday?" He did not even have the strength to speak at all, and it could be seen just how hard and mad he had indulged himself last night. If it was known that he would turn out like this, he would not have kept the boy with him back then. He had now brought nothing but shame to that person, which would forever not let her rest in peace even in death. Qingbei just sat there to look up at Yin Yu on the high seat silently, seeing the undisguised disappointment and rage. That good-looking and pale countenance did not show the slightest ripple of emotion, but somewhere in his heart, it was suddenly starting to become clear right at that moment. He could not believe himself. His father. He would rather believe the words of an outsider than to choose to believe his own son. Simply because he was not Yin Su's flesh and blood, and so a certain level of estrangement still existed between them? Actually, if he thought just a little deeper into it, he would have discovered that it was all just one of Mo Han Yan's venomous schemes. But he did not even want to think about it at all, which just affirmed his guilt to everyone else. Qingbei closed his eyes, and something suddenly felt like it had been unraveled in his heart. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. All the concern and attention Yin Su had shown him these days had already slowly allowed him to release the knot lodged in his heart. He had even been willing to let bygones be bygones in regards to the fact that Mo Han Yan had gotten both his legs crippled back. Then when he saw that Yin Su was doing everything he could to make it up to him, the two of them, Qing Yu and him, who had been abandoned from young, had made him pine so hard for love and concern. Qing Yu had said that he was being very foolish and too soft-hearted. Just as the atmosphere had fallen to become unbearably stifling and oppressive, where the air felt highly suffocating, the sound of light laughter suddenly came in from outside the doors, and a slender figure then appeared before everyone as it slowly came walking in closer to all of them. That person was dressed in white clothes that were not tainted by even the slightest speck of dust, her thick luxurious hair casually held together by a hairpin. She clearly looked like she did not care all that much about her own appearance, but everything on her just looked so highly suitable, looking somewhat languid with an indifferent air. The manicured brows were slightly upraised, and directly below them were an enchanting pair of eyes, long and narrow like those of a fox, tinged with the light of wisdom and farsightedness. Her elegant nose was tall, her tiny cherry lips curved up in a playful smile. It was a face so exquisite it was almost dreamy, which dazzled everyone in the hall as they looked at her in a daze. Chapter 82. 2. All full of holes. The one who was most surprised was Mo Han Yan. She had clearly just seen this young lady not too long ago, but it seemed that every time she saw her, she was so blindingly radiant that it made it impossible for people to shift their eyes away, where she looked even more outstanding than that woman in the past. Just seeing Yin Su's stunned and captivated expression told her as much. The young lady did not care about all the strange gazes everyone was looking at her with, and she did not even so much as glance at the youth seated in the wheelchair, but had walked over to come right before the little servant girl, who was sobbing hysterically on the floor. Her slender fingers lightly lifted the servant girl's chin. Her voice was tinged with smile, but the icy cold in those phoenix-like eyes sent a shiver through her spine. Whoa! This little face is rather good-looking indeed. The servant girl was so terrified she was shaking visibly, not daring to even say a single word, but just let her tears continue to flow down her cheeks. Qing Yu burst out laughing, and then turned to look up to the dark-faced Yin Su seated high up on the main seat, as the corners of her lips curled up with a faint smile. Has father investigated clearly that this servant girl was bullied by Qingbei? The evidence is clear, and he has also admitted to it with his silence. Yin Su said in a deep voice. Evidence? Qing Yu looked as if she had just heard something very funny. According to what father has said, just creating some ambiguous marks on the servant girl's body, and having her come sobbing before you with her clothes in utter disarray to wail that little Bei has violated her. You have decided that there's no need to hear Qingbei's explanation, just because of a few words from some outsiders? So that is what so-called evidence is. I had thought that only the foolish and ignorant will come to believe such wild accusations. It must be known that sometimes, even what the eyes see for themselves might not be the entire truth. Father, you have greatly disappointed me. She stood there right in the front with her back straight and unbending. She was clearly saying such hurtful words, but her face was still smiling. Her pair of beautiful phoenix-like eyes shining with a mirthful glint, like it was impossible to ever reach into the depths of her heart. That gaze. For just one fleeting moment, Yen-Su seemed to see that person from those many years before, who had said these very same words to him. She had said, "Yen-Su, I am very disappointed in you." He quickly came back to his senses. As if he was silently comforting himself, he waved off the strange feeling in his heart and said, "Unless you can find the evidence that can clear his name. Otherwise, if news of this matter leaks out, the name of the entire Eternal Peace Duke Manor will be shamed." Qingyu curled up her lips scornfully. There is no way of explaining oneself out of a trumped-up charge. Haha, but if father insists on evidence. She suddenly paused and her piercing gaze turned to look at Emo Han Yen on the other side. If I do not get a satisfactory reply on this matter here today, I will not mind scraping off a few layers of skin off the hidden mastermind behind it. Emo Han Yen was startled by that sudden gaze turned upon her out of the blue, but she quickly composed herself, and there wasn't the slightest ripple on her face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Humph. I would like to see how these two bastard children are going to clear themselves of the accusation. So what if they possess gifted talents? They will forever be beneath Ning Er's feet, never to be able to get back on their feet. I will never allow that woman's children to have any chance to even threaten Ning Er. Never ever. Qingbei looked at the young lady standing there neither submissive nor aggressive, but striving just to defend him, and his heart was greatly moved once again. The heavens must have seen that he has suffered so much, and hence they have sent Qingyu to come to his side to protect him. No matter when, Qingyu was always like a strong and sturdy castle around him that protected him, never allowing anyone to bully him. The hands inside his sleeves were tightly clenched up together to hide the trembling. In this world, only one person really cared, and was genuinely concerned for him. That was enough. From today onwards, he will never again covet all those things that were not his to possess in the first place. Chapter 82. 3. All full of holes, but with the current circumstances, in order to make it seem real, he must not expose himself prematurely, or Qingyu's ploy would go up in smoke. On the other side, Qingyu bent herself down and looked at the servant girl weeping softly, the ends of her mouth lifting up slightly. "Come tell me, last night, how did the second master violate you brutally?" Those highly explicit words said in a smiling but mirthless voice caused everyone in the hall to become curious. What kind of a show is she going to put on now? The little servant girl was trembling visibly, looking like she was recalling something very horrifying, before she then started to speak after a while. "Last night, your servant brought the medicine to the second young master." "What kind of medicine was it?" Qingyu asked, as she raised an eyebrow. "It was medicine that His Highness asked your servant to deliver, a tonic to nourish the young master's body," the servant girl said in a soft voice. Yen-Su nodded. "This duke has indeed instructed for people to send the medicine over." Qingyu lifted her chin and said, "You can continue." The servant girl took a glance up at the main seat, and then lowered her eyes as she continued. "After the second young master took his medicine, your servant was just about to leave when the second young master suddenly grabbed your servant and started to tear at my clothes. And he said that he likes me." Qingbei's eyes turned cold, filling up with contempt. Has he gone blind? That girl thinks that she's rather attractive, and is always hovering around before him, always trying to seduce him and win him over, but he does not even know her name. And saying that he likes her? In your dreams. He will rather fall in love with anyone plucked out from the streets than like her. Qingyu saw the undisguised contempt and anger on the youth's face, and she could not help but smile for a moment, before she turned to look meaningfully at the woman up on the high seat, who had been calm and composed throughout. Emo Han Yin just cannot remain idle. She had just not come back for one night, and that woman already cannot wait to pounce upon little Belle. When she came back, The fragrance of the drunken immortal flower still had not dispersed throughout the night. Just how heavy a dosage it must have been. Fortunately, the drunken immortal flower only numbs a person's senses and weakens them to the point that they are temporarily not able to speak. Once the poison is alleviated, it does not harm the body much. Though the youth seemed a little weakened, he still looked rather conscious and aware of his surroundings. The servant girl was still sobbing aggrievedly as she said, "The second young master is my master, and I am merely a lowly servant. Whatever the master wants, your servant has no choice but to comply. But the second young master, he has a particular perversion, which nearly tormented your servant to death. Didn't you mention before that you struggled hard and refused to give in, fighting to break free? And now you are saying that the master's words must be complied to?" The person who said this was Yan Shicheng. The servant girl had clearly not expected that anyone would say anything against her words at all, and she was stunned for a moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mohan Yen had similarly not thought that Yan Shicheng would suddenly speak, and her beautiful eyes turned indignant at that moment. "Ching Er, what do you know? Don't make things messier than it already is." "Mother," from a little servant girl, "and we're all sitting here to hear her spout such nonsense to besmirch Qing Bei's name? I think that she saw that father has recently been treating Qing Bei a little more affectionately, and she spiked the medicine with something. Once what's done cannot be undone. At the very worst she could still be very well made a concubine." Yan Shicheng said with a scornful laugh, as he looked at the stunned servant girl. "From what I can see looking at Qing Bei, it's not that he is refusing to speak, but he is just unable to talk." With those words, the faces of Han and Mo Yen and the servant girl down below immediately changed in color. The face of the servant girl immediately turned deathly pale, her expression sorrowful. "Our heir, although your servant is of humble birth, but I am still from a clean and clear family. For you to say that of your servant is too ashamed to continue to live, and can only clear my name with death." Her voice had just dropped when her eyes took on a cold glint. Like she was finally liberated, she raised her hand and struck it upon the top of her own head. Chapter 83. 1. The cloven hoof exposed Qing Yu narrowed her eyes and curled up her finger. A stream of air shot out which struck the servant girl's arm. At the same time, Yan Shicheng had nimbly moved to restrain her. Qing Yu walked over to go right before her, and smiled at Yan Shicheng gratefully, before she went on to look upon the servant girl, who had her eyes tightly shut. "What? You couldn't continue with the pretense, and want to be liberated from it by death? Or?" Her alluringly beautiful countenance leaned in close, her light breath blowing gently upon the servant girl's face. "Someone is intimidating you into doing that." The expression on the servant girl's face turned into shock. Her eyelashes quivered a moment as her face turned ashen gray. The answer was known without needing any words. But Qing Yu was not going to let the matter rest there. That would be letting that woman and Mohan Yen off too lightly. She let out a cold, chilling laugh, and her eyes turned upon Mohan Yen with indiscernible meaning, which caused the latter to feel a chill run through her. That little slut's eyes felt so strange. Yen Su's gaze was fixed upon the young lady the entire time. Exactly alike. Even the brilliant radiance between her brows was exactly the same, just as eye-catching as that person back then, drawing people's eyes to her regardless of the time or place. The young lady's eyes suddenly turned to look at him. Yen Su was physically taken aback, but her voice then took on a soft and gentle tone, tinged faintly with sorrow. "I had thought that although father is a duke, but he is a father just like one in any family, who loves his own children. Is it because mother is not here? My younger brother's legs are crippled, and is unable to walk, unable to live like any normal person. Why do you still want to treat him like this? He's just a pitiful little child." The young lady's eyes then lowered slightly, as she stroked the pale face of the youth in the wheelchair. That pair of eyes that lose its brilliant sparkle, in just one instant, just wrenched at Yen Su's heart so painfully. "Qing Yu, father promised mother that you will take good care of us. I had thought that even if we are unable to be like our elder brother and sisters, to live a life of abundance and luxury, indulged and doted upon, we would at least be able to feel secure as this would be home to us, and not have to fall asleep in fear every night, not knowing when we will unknowingly be assassinated in our sleep. Yen Su's eyes flared wide as he stared, as if he did not know that they had been living like this in the manor all these years. And there are people seeking to have them killed? Have all the guards in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor all died? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Yen Shicheng, who was beside him, was looking incredulous and in utter disbelief, their gazes unconsciously shifting to fall upon Emo Han Yen. Those assassins, did they have something to do with Mother? Emo Han Yen had naturally noticed Yen Su's gaze. The quaking rage in Yen Su's eyes had caused her body to turn cold, and she immediately opened her mouth to stop Qingyu from continuing on. Huh, that's a really brilliant story you made up. If there were really assassins trying to kill you like you said, then how did the two of you manage to live till today? What utter hogwash! The Duchess has most probably forgotten that I've told you before that a mysterious expert has accepted me as a disciple. Qingyu said as the corners of her mouth pulled slightly back, to look smilingly at Emo Han Yen, who was beginning to become flustered, while she did everything she could to try to cover up. My master took pity on me, and did everything he could despite the hardship, to turn the useless trash that I was into what I am today. He even taught me medicine in case I came to be given poison, and do not know it. So what? Emo Han Yen said with her brows knitted together, not knowing what the young lady meant with those words. Chapter 83. 2. The cloven hoof exposed. So, the Duchess feels that, if things were really as what this servant girl has said, that little Belle has some perverted habit, and was acting like a lunatic at that time. To think that with her small and weak little body, she is still able to escape from the room after suffering an entire night of torment, I cannot help but highly suspect her real intentions. After Qingyu said all that with a smiling face, she looked at the ashen-faced servant girl. Possibly because you do not practice martial arts, and hence you do not know about lightning element wielders all that much. Usually when a lightning element wielder loses their mind or fly into a berserk rage, anything that is alive around them will be struck by lightning and die. Of course there are exceptions to that. If you possess a higher level of power than him, then you can still remain safe and sound. The fact that Yen Su had invited Qin Fong, a former elder of the Faint Mist sect, to come teach his children, who were at an opportune age, was something that everyone had heard about. Among the few of them, Qing Bei had been most gifted, and was a wielder of the incredibly powerful lightning element. Qin Fong had also said that he was greatly talented with a lot of potential, picking up anything he was taught very quickly, and was very intelligent. If that was really true, then not only had the servant girl not died, but was still very much alive here. Could she be a spy who had managed to sneak in among them? If so, she must be much more of an expert than she seems. The servant girl had obviously not expected that things would play out like this, and her face immediately grew a darker gray. Even Emo Han Yen had not thought that there would be such a turn of events. Her nails dug deeply into her palms as her enchanting brows took on an unnoticeable dark glint. Yen Shicheng did not miss the expressions of the servant girl and Emo Han Yen, and his handsome countenance showed a sliver of disappointment. Why is Mother still unable to let it go? Will she only be appeased after she has them completely wiped out? The faces of the people there showed a variety of expressions. However, things have not yet ended. At that moment, the servant girl was then seen slumping weakly down to the floor from having knelt for such a long period of time, as her conscience was racked with fear, and a thin sheen of sweat broke out over her temples. Qingyu arched up her long sharp eyebrows, and then said in a light fleeting voice, "And aren't all of you forgetting one more thing? The Faint Mist sect has always been said to be a place that deities live in, noble and pure. And most of the secret martial arts techniques they cultivate requires one to abstain from wine and remain celibate. Hence they have never accepted people who are addicted to drink and revel in lusty pursuits. Because of that, unless one is already married and have children, all the unmarried young men and women they take in are untainted and have remained chaste. Can the Duchess then help me explain just what kind of an irresistible charm does this servant girl possess, that she is able to make Qing Bei give up on the chance to go to the Faint Mist sect, choosing instead to partake in such improper and illicit affair with her? Once those words came out, everyone present seemed to have suddenly awakened, thinking that they seemed to have completely forgotten about such an important detail about the whole matter. One of the stages in the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials was to test whether the unmarried young men and women were still chaste, and all the hedonistic and pleasure-loving young masters can forget about wanting to be accepted. So it was rumored that all in the Faint Mist sect were a bunch of deities who does not even eat the common food of mortals. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Han Yen was at a loss for words, unable to think of anything to say in rebuttal. In all honesty, no matter what kind of a reason it is, it will sound a little far-fetched, as who could possibly choose to not want the opportunity to be accepted into the Faint Mist sect, just for a moment of pleasure, by willingly destroying their body's chastity, unless that person was a mindless fool. At that moment, even Yen Su finally came to realize that something wasn't right, and he slammed his large palm hard onto the arm of his chair. Because he had exerted too much strength, the chair's arm cracked in a few places while his voice was icy cold and filled with an oppressive aura. What an audacious lowly servant! You even dare to slander your master. Tell this duke here the entire truth now. Who sent you here as a spy? And who is the one pulling the strings behind? If you do not confess everything here today, with the methods this duke uses to deal with military convicts, I fear a little girl like you will not be able to withstand it at all. Chapter 83. 3. The cloven hoof exposed Yen Su had stormed through countless battlefields all these years, and the blood-stained aura on him was no joke. With just a slight raising of his voice in rage, his words made the little servant girl, whose last line of mental psychological defense was already on the verge of breaking, completely collapse at that moment. Spare me my life, your highness. Your servant. It was all just my own wishful thinking, and I was blinded by greed, not content to submit myself to a fate of being just a lowly servant, and to be at the beck and call of people. So I decided to spike the second young master's medicine. Those words seemed to be an attempt at heaping all the blame for the crime upon herself. It was not known what kind of a hold Mo Han Yen held in her hand over the little servant girl that made her not dare to reveal the mastermind behind the plot, even when she was shaking like a leaf in terror from Yen Su's shout. Haha. Letting Mo Han Yen escape calamity so easily. Not possible. The mirth in Qing Yu's eyes deepened further, and she then said in a rather admiring tone, "It looks like this servant girl is also highly skilled and knowledgeable in medicine. Otherwise, how could she possibly know to use such a common drunken immortal flower to be mixed with drugs that cause hallucinations, that makes people lose their mind and become incredibly aroused?" With an abrupt turn in her words, she suddenly swung around to look at Mo Han Yen, saying each word with a slight pause in between, seemingly not bothered by the venomous glare staring back at her, that was as sharp as steel blades. "I heard that the Duchess has always loved flowers, and the several pots of drunken immortal flowers in her backyard are absolutely gorgeous, their fragrance nose tingling. But although drunken immortal flowers are absolutely beautiful and enchanting, they are however harmful to the body. The Duchess must remember to take care of your health." "What do you mean by that? Are you insinuating that this Duchess here is the one who instigated that little servant girl to go harm others?" Mo Han Yin was looking like she had been so wrongfully accused, and was questioning her in indignant rage. The Duchess' words caused Yen Su to be rather surprised, thinking that Mo Han Yin might be overreacting a little. "Duchess, Qing Yu is merely just throwing out guesses, and has no intention of suspecting you at all. Do not take it to heart too much. It might be because Qing Yu really looked too much like that person, and Yen Su had unconsciously just jumped to her defense." Hearing that, Mo Han Yan's face immediately changed. The countenance that had been maintained to look as pretty as a young lady was tinged with a little bitterness and looked rather pale. Her beautiful eyes brimming with tears, she said, "Is your Highness blaming me now? Or are you saying that you believe that young lass words and think that I am an unscrupulous and venomous evil, which who would not stop at anything?" Mo Han Yin was General Shang's most beloved youngest daughter, smart and intelligent, ravishingly beautiful. Seeing her looks now, one would be able to see the kind of enchanting poise she must have possessed when she was younger. She had married Yen Su when she was 14, and had come to bear him a son and a daughter, both with outstanding looks and extraordinary talents, whom Yen Su had always been exceptionally proud of. With their affinity of more than 20 years as husband and wife, deep down in Yen Su's heart, he still loved her. If he had not met that person, he always thought that his heart would never have changed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. From what he still remembered, she had always been a gentle and dutiful wife, never throwing any kind of tantrum, but just only that one time. It had been because he had brought that person back. She had been hysterical back then, and he could still clearly remember how she had looked back then. That had been the only time, and right after that, she had then moved out from the main house, and her character had changed into one that he could not fully comprehend. But with her expression looking like she was silently enduring her aggrievement, and on the very verge of tears, it made his heart soften again, as he felt that he still owed her all these years. Yen Su sighed lightly. "This Duke does not mean that, but just feel that the entire matter isn't as simple as it seems on the surface." "Then what does your Highness mean then?" Mo Han Yin said, her gaze looking icily at the young lady down below. With her insinuating and shadowy words, isn't she suspecting that it is this Duchess here, that it manipulating the whole thing behind? This Duke will naturally not any false accusations, not will I allow the mastermind to get away scot-free. Yen Su said in a gentle voice, trying to appease and calm her down, getting her back into her seat. Chapter 84. 1. You can stand up already? Qing Yu watched with amusement at the exchange between the two of them, not really surprised at the attitude Yen Su was taking. Her alluring fox-like eyes narrowed as she looked at the servant girl that was restrained by Yen Shicheng. There should be a chastity granny in the manor, who will be able to inspect her body, right? I would have to trouble father to summon the granny, and have her check the servant girl's body, and see if she is still a virgin. Yen Su's brows furrowed up. You mean to say that she is still a virgin maiden? Haha. It doesn't count when I say it, or the Duchess will say that I am just spouting nonsense later. Qing Yu said with a shrug of her shoulders, the smile on her face highly meaningful. The servant girl was taken out from there. The granny who would check her body was the nanny who had always been looking after Yen Su, a person who could be trusted. Very soon, the granny came shuffling in. She looked to be about 50 years of age, with faint wrinkles on her face that was friendly-looking and highly benevolent. Greetings to His Highness and Duchess. Dispense with the formalities, Granny. What's the result? Yen Su asked. The marks on that last body shows that she has indeed suffered severe torture, and there were even marks from whipping and biting, frightening to see. Granny recalled what she saw earlier, and her heart was mournful. What a pitiful child. Yen Su's eyes darkened, and he was just about to open his mouth when the granny spoke again. But although her injuries were serious, her body is still complete and untainted. What did you say? Mo Han Yan's eyes stared wide and round. Have you made a mistake in your inspection? Duchess, my old humble self was also in charge of inspecting the ladies in the imperial palace when I was younger, and I have never made an error. Although the granny was a little displeased, but she still replied highly respectfully. Mo Han Yin shook her head in disbelief. How is it possible? How could she still be untainted? Why should that be impossible? Little Bei had not done anything to her at all. Qing Yu said as the ends of her mouth curled up. Not to mention that his body is just starting to make a recovery, and he will not have the energy to do something like this. Moreover, he had also received pointers from my master, and is now able to practice cultivation. With such prodigious gift, How could he possibly do something that would harm his body's energy essence, just to torment a servant girl? With the switch in her tone of voice, she turned the spear point straight onto Emo Han Yen. But why is the Duchess getting so highly worked up? You said that the entire matter has nothing to do with you in the slightest. Why don't you ask the other concubines whether they believe that? Emo Han Yen quickly turned herself around to look at the bunch of ladies who had come here just to watch the show. Every single one of their gazes filled with suspicion and tinted with contempt. Her gaze then slowly shifted over to look at Yen Su, only to discover that the man she had loved for 20 over years was looking at her with a complicated kind of eyes, which chilled her heart like a tomb. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But no matter what, she needed to maintain her last measure of composure and dignity. Emo Han Yen pushed down and restrained her emotions against all those many pair of eyes, like she did not feel the surrounding animosity and the eyes looking at her strangely at all, as she said in an emotionless voice. Even if the servant girl had exaggerated her words and made it such a big deal, the injuries on her body cannot be faked. Yen Qingbei must have used violence, but was unsuccessful, and his carelessness allowed the servant girl to escape. As a young master of the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, and he has done such a shameful thing to a servant, he should still be punished. Even at the point where the truth was already almost as good as having been fully revealed, the woman Emo Han Yen still refused to let Qingbei go, doggedly insisting on making an issue out of the injuries on the servant girl's body. Qingyu did not say anything, but just lifted the corners of her mouth scornfully. Thereafter, just as everyone were flabbergasted as their eyes stared at the scene before them, the weak and pale-faced youth then stood up from his wheelchair before all those pair of eyes. At the moment the youth stood up, the air around him and his demeanor changed in an instant. His dispirited person suddenly disappeared, his eyes turning icy cold. Chapter 84. 2. You can stand up already? If I had really done anything to a weak and defenseless servant girl, I will not be so foolish to let her live and give her such a great hold over me. The youth's cold and emotionless voice slowly startled everyone out of their astoundment from seeing him stand up. The youth who had always looked so frail and thin had not stood up before for all these years. Hence, when they found out for the first time just how tall and towering his body's frame really was, almost as tall as Yen Shicheng, at the very moment that he stood up, he seemed even taller than he really was for an instant. May I ask, when I am really fully mobile like this with full use of my limbs, would she possibly have a chance to escape at all? Qingbei said contemptuously, his handsome long narrow eyes glinting sharply as he swept his gaze over to the servant girl on the ground, whose face had gone deathly pale. Yen Su stood up from his chair with shock in his eyes, and said in disbelief, Qingbei, you can stand up already? I have been able to stand on my feet from a long time ago. Qingbei said with a malevolent gaze, as he looked at Emo Han Yen. If you had not hatched a plot like this against me this time, I will not show I can stand before everyone so early. All the suppressed emotions held down within the youth for so long seemed to explode out at that moment. All the pressure built up from the maddening rage threw out an oppression that even Yen Su had felt a little oppressed. 10 years. Emo Han Yen, I sat in a wheelchair for 10 years. Crippled for 10 whole years. It was not enough that you broke both my legs, and you wanted to completely destroy me this time. Are you seeking to make me be a failure who will not accomplish anything? One whom no one would know, or even hear of my entire life? The youth's tall figure slowly approached closer one step at a time. His cold, unfeeling voice spat out from his mouth, every single word crystal clear. Both the face of Emo Han Yen and Yen Su changed a shade. This matter had always been a secret in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor. Back when Yen Su had found out about this, although he had been filled with rage, but to protect his reputation, he did not want news that the lady of the Eternal Peace Duke Manor could so heartlessly do such a cruel thing to a young child to spread. He had just told people that Qingbei had been too playful, having accidentally fallen off from a tree while playing, and had broken his legs. In the main hall at that moment, besides the royal concubines and ladies of the various courtyards, there were all tens of servants present. When they heard that astounding piece of news, they all immediately blew their tops. What? So the second master did not fall and break his own legs? Can you believe how selfish and narrow-minded the Duchess is? How could she do such a thing to a little child? The second master said he had been in a wheelchair for 10 whole years. Then doesn't that mean he was only about 4 or 5 when? No wonder none of the ladies in the manor dared to give birth to a son all these years. Besides the heir who is birthed by the Duchess, all other children born are girls. The second young master is the only other son, and he had mysteriously become a cripple back then. Now she is even seeking to destroy his future completely. You really can't tell a book by its cover. The Duchess looks to be such a gentle and virtuous wife on the surface. The most terrifying ones are people who are always wearing a smile on their faces, but their hearts are always thinking of venomous ways to harm you. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Qing Yu's corners of her lips raised up in an arc, revealing an indiscernible smile. It must be known that the most scary thing was slanderous gossip, which often could force a person back into a helpless corner. Now everyone knew Emo Han Yan's real person. The gentle and virtuous image she had built up and maintained for so many years collapsed in that instant. There was no need for Qing Yu to do anything else. With so many pairs of eyes, ears and mouth here today, unless they were all silenced, otherwise someone was bound to leak it out. All those people were carefully discussing in hushed voices on the surface, but who among the Duke's family had not cultivated martial arts before? Hence they all possessed astounding hearing and moreover, Emo Han Yan herself was one who possessed a significant level of cultivation. Chapter 84. 3. You can stand up already? The servants were all taken aback in horror, the concubines and ladies avoiding her like she was a venomous serpent. A dark and sinister aura exuded from Yen Su's body, and all of that heavy and oppressive power was directed straight towards Han Emo Yen. But at that moment, she was acting like she was not bothered by everything at all. She suddenly laughed out loud, and when she raised her eyes, everyone saw that cruelly ugly face that had shed off its mask of false pretense. So what if I had been the one who did that to you? She spat out those words viciously, without any fear of consequences, and like she did not care anymore. This woman is actually admitting to it. Just as everyone was feeling dubious of her real intentions, Emo Han Yan suddenly broke into wild laughter like she had gone mad. What right does a bastard child like you have to live in this world? You should have died long ago. Both of you should have died by right. Yen Su was greatly shocked by her words. By the time he realized that something didn't feel right, Emo Han Yan had already spat out all the aggrievement she had kept hidden in her heart, without a care in the world. The Duke was the one who let that shameless woman come in here, and she gave birth to you 2 illegitimate bastards from her illicit affair with some other unknown man. It was retribution that she died so early. At that moment that Emo Han Yan was screaming out loudly, Yen Su caught her unawares when he reached his hand out and struck her on the back of her neck. Emo Han Yan immediately fell limp and slumped back into her chair. Cheng Er, your mother has gotten too worked up and is spouting nonsense. Bring her back to her room to rest. Yen Su said in a deep voice. Yen Shicheng had still been immersed in the version of truth that Qing Bei had said, and had not awoken from it. Hearing Yen Su say that, he then woodenly held Emo Han Yan in his arms and carried her out. But those words that Emo Han Yan had said earlier was already causing everyone there to find it hard to digest and react to it. In this Duke's manner, just how many secrets were there that they were completely unaware of? Yen Su swept his gaze over the people below, who had strange expressions on their faces. His eyes then glinted sharply as he ordered, all the things that you've heard here today, forget every single word of it without any exception. If this Duke is to ever hear the slightest whisper about this outside, you will not be shown any mercy. Everyone's heart quivered, and they all immediately chorused. Yes, Your Highness, your servant lady does not know anything. You're all dismissed. Yen Su said as he closed his eyes, feeling thoroughly exhausted, waving his sleeve at them for them to go. In the next instant, the enormous hall emptied out and only 3 people, Yen Su, Qing Yu and Qing Bei, were left in there. After a rather long while of deathly silence, the clear, soft, mirthful voice of a young lady sounded. "Doesn't father have any sort of explanation he wants to give us?" Regarding those words the Duchess said earlier, "I do not believe that it was all just nonsense she spouted out in the heat of the moment." Yen Su's brows knitted up slightly, and that good-looking face could not defy the vestiges of time, as it showed a moment of weary sadness. His gaze looked deeply at the young lady's exquisitely beautiful countenance, and his voice turned a little hoarse as he said, "You really look very much like your mother. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Yu Qingyu was taken aback a moment. This was seemingly the first time she had heard Yen Su mention her mother. "Do they really look that alike? Your mother was a very gentle woman, but her heart was incredibly strong-willed, seemingly good to each and every person, and nobody seemed to be good enough for her," Yen Su said with a bitter laugh, overcome with emotion. "Hence, how much I envied the one person she had really loved, and how fortunate he was. When I saw her for the very time many years back, I was never able to forget her. When I saw her again, she had already become someone's wife, and was already with child," Yen Su said softly, looking like he was going to come clean on everything with them. Chapter 85. 1. Hidden secret from back then, because Qing Bei had already told her before when he had accidentally overheard Yen Su and Emo Han Yan's conversation, where he had come to know that they were not Yen Su's biological children. So when he was telling them that, the 2 siblings were not all that surprised. At that moment, Yen Su looked like he had fallen deep into the thick and blurry past. "I did not know why she was all alone when she was with child. I asked her about it before, where the child's father was, but she did not tell me." Yen Su heaved a deep sigh when he spoke of that, his gaze filled with endless regret. "I just cannot imagine when such a woman was carrying a child in her. How could that man just let her remain out there all by herself? She had been so proud back then, and to think that she would fall to such a fate. If I had not insisted that she stay in the Duke's manor to take care of her, while she was pregnant with you, I fear that the 2 of you might not have safely descended onto this world." Qing Yu and Qing Bei just listened quietly, never having ever expected that their mother would have such a thing happen to her in her past. That she had been pitifully left to wander, without a fixed place to call home. And where had their so-called father gone to, the man that had moved the heart of their proud and strong-willed mother, to make her willing to carry her child for him? Where was he? Although she had not told me who that man was till the end, I could feel that she really loved him," Yen Su said softly, his gaze becoming gentle as he looked at the pair of siblings who looked so much like each other. "And also the 2 of you. Your names were given to you by your mother. Qing is your mother's surname, and her name is Qing Fei." "Qing Fei?" Qing Yu unconsciously muttered out aloud. So that was what their mother's name was. "I have neglected the 2 of you all this time for so many years, and I have broken my promise I made to her back then. She had been too cruel to me, and also too cruel to her flesh and blood." Yen Su's voice was a little choked up, and he held both his hands up, covering his face, like he was struggling to stop the tears surging up within. Back when she was in labor, the granny taking care of her said that she had mistakenly taken abortion-inducing medicine that would cause her to bleed profusely, and it would kill her if left untreated, though Emo Han Yen had played a part in that. But right after that, she then suddenly disappeared without a trace. I was devastated with grief, and had wanted to give her a proper burial for her to rest in peace, but she had not even left her dead body behind. No one knew of this matter, as everyone who was involved in it were all secretly disposed of by me. I am telling this only to the 2 of you. Qing Fei's grave is empty, and it is only a memorial. Although I do not know where she had gone to have abandoned even her own flesh and blood, there is one thing I am very certain of. She did not die. She had never told me where she was from because she did not want to implicate me, but her cultivation was highly profound, and also a high-leveled elixir cultivator. I have a feeling that she might be intricately linked to the highest level realm, the legendary Cloud Heaven. Qin Fang told me that the two of you possess extraordinary gift, which is even more outstanding than Ning Er's, and I was thinking that this shows that you two are indeed the children of that woman Qing Fei. If the two of you have the opportunity to go to the top-level realm, you may then find some clues towards finding your mother. After Yen Su came clean with them on everything, the feelings of the pair of siblings were rather heavy and complicated. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After they went back to the tranquil abode, they did not bother with the stunned faces of the servants when they saw Qing Bei walking his way in, but remained somber and silent for a long time, the air hanging around them stifling and depressing. If their mother was still alive, then what kind of secret was hidden behind this? From what Yen Su said, since their mother loved them, why had she left without a single word, and left her children into the care of an outsider? This was something that they did not understand, nor was it something they could accept. Little Bei, do you want to go to Cloud Heaven? Chapter 85. 2. Hidden secret. From back then it was not known how much time passed, but the setting sun could be seen aglow outside. The sky was ablaze with a fiery red, looking exceptionally brilliant. Qing Bei's lowered lashes moved, and he then opened his mouth to say, "Yes, I want to and I need to, but I know that I am still not strong enough now, so before that, I shall strive to make myself stronger, to possess enough power to go see mother." "You will," Qing Yu said, ruffling the hair on his head, "and I'll always be by your side." The youth's eyes were warm and gentle, as he looked at her sentimentally from under her palm. "And now, I no longer have to hide from others by pretending to be crippled at last. That woman Emo Han Yen has revealed her true self, and I fear that despite having pretended to go into seclusion for cleansing cultivation for so many years, she would now really need to go into seclusion for real. Otherwise, once she steps out through the doors, she will surely drown from everyone's spit." Hearing the youth's words, Qing Yu was slightly surprised, and she retracted her hand as she asked in puzzlement, "When I came back, there was a very thick scent of drunken immortal flowers, and you should have been affected by the drug. Haven't you recovered a little quickly from it?" And when she had seen him in the main hall earlier, he had clearly looked completely listless and dispirited. Qing Bei raised up an eyebrow and gave a rather devious smile. "I had indeed fallen under the drug's effects, but a larger part of it was feigned. Such low-grade poisons and drugs can't do much to me at this point already." "Oh, and why is that?" "The credit for this goes to Little Snow. It had sucked out the toxins in my body for 3 whole years, and I am always together with it all the time nowadays. Over time, I discovered that my body's constitution had changed quite a bit, and I have built up a certain amount of resistance against drugs and poisons." Qing Yu was highly taken aback by what she heard, like she had never thought that such an amazing thing could happen. This was really a blessing in disguise, and she then said as she shook her head helplessly, "Then you must really thank Little Snow properly. That toad has really earned great credit this time. Of course, when it comes back after it has finished playing outside, I will personally go catch a big large jar of worms for it to eat." Qing Bei said, his face shining with delight. Little Snow was a 1,000-year-old ice toad, and it drinks only dew and feeds on fresh flowers. You want to go catch a whole jar full of worms? Are you serious? Night fell, and Qing Bei had been studying very intently into the modified lightning summoning palm manual recently. After Qing Yu gave him some pointers in a few areas, he had immediately come to comprehend its contents, and he had been able to deduce even further into it to invent an even higher level palm strike, which caused Qing Yu to be greatly pleased. Upon the table, the tiny little snow toad just sat there, its mouth croaking like a drum like it was eating something. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Only upon closer inspection would one see that there were round lustrous white jade-like elixir pills that numbered as many as several tens on the table. The little fellow was almost smacking its lips as it ate the pills one at a time, seemingly highly satisfied as it ate. It was great that it was with an elixir cultivator as its mistress. It had all these high-grade elixirs every day that it could eat like little candy sweets, which not only filled its stomach, but also increased its spirit power in cultivation. All these years, Qingyu had reared little Snow into becoming a toad with such tender flesh and silky smooth skin, and it could very well be said that it was one of the prettiest-looking toad there was around. Qingyu shook her head helplessly, and she walked over to poke at the little creature's abdomen. In the end, it nearly choked on an elixir from the sudden provocation, and very nearly couldn't catch its breath. It then glared balefully at its mistress with its round and googly eyes. Why did you stab me in the stomach out of the blue? Don't you know you might have become a murderer of a toad like that? TSK, you're glaring at me? Qingyu was amused by its expression, and she went on to poke at its soft stomach, once more out of curiosity. You are just such a tiny little fella. How can you eat so much? You have already eaten more than 100 pills of these elixirs in one sitting, and aren't you afraid you'll stuff yourself to death? More importantly, do you know what you ate is actually several 100,000 taels of gold here? Chapter 85. 3. Hidden secret from back then. Croak. What are gold tails? Toad doesn't like to eat gold tails, but loves to eat their sweet tasty little candies. Little Snow blinked its eyes in innocent ignorance. Alright, go ahead and eat them all. I'll go sleep first. After you finish eating you better go catch all the mosquitoes, and you are not to sneakily jump into my bed, understand? Qingyu said with her eyebrow arched up slightly, and then put on a threatening smile on her face to continue to say, if I come to find that you jumped up into my bed, I'll have red braised snow toad to eat tomorrow. Little Snow's tiny body unconsciously trembled pitifully, and another elixir pill slid down its throat into its tummy so smoothly without thinking. It croaked a couple of times, and was still quivering slightly as it finished up the several more elixirs, before it then went into a small corner, trying its best to reduce its presence. What is this red braised snow toad? Why does that sound so terrifying? On the other side, Wuxia was doing everything within his power to use his glib and irresistibly honeyed tongue, before he finally managed to convince his own cold and heartless sister, who was more than a handful to deal with, to go save a person. It was after all a member of the three great sects. Although the internal departments might not be made aware of this, but they should still establish good relations with them on the surface at least. And he would also have the most powerful assassination temple hidden behind the carefree valley come to owe him a favor. No matter how you looked at it, this matter was highly beneficial to him. But what they had not expected was that the entire matter would be so thorny. According to what one of the 10 great assassins, Feng Qi had said on the day when he had come to look for him, that brother-in-arms of theirs could not live in dark and damp places, or his condition would worsen. But as the assassination temple was situated within a valley, the air was highly humid, and hence they had shifted him into a courtyard in the capital's suburbs. The light was much better there, and the place better ventilated. Feng Qi and his men had naturally gotten other elixir cultivators to come have a look before, but those people had not even been able to make themselves get close to the patient before they all went running away from that strange condition that they had never seen before. Hearing that, Mulai snorted derisively through her nose, thinking how could those people even consider themselves to be elixir cultivators? Aren't they afraid that they are bringing shame upon the name of elixir cultivators? Her nickname as the demoness was not given to her in vain. Although she was a girl, she was more resolute and decisive than a lot of men in her ways and actions. She was also gutsy, having tamed a ferocious and malevolent spirit beast when she was just 4 years old, born to hold great power, where she felt no fear even upon encountering such a massive beast that had devoured countless lives. Many men outside greatly admired this young lord of the Mu family, and hence Feng Qi and his men greatly believed in her, and were filled with anticipation to see what she could do. The group of several people rode horses for slightly more than an hour before they finally reached their destination. This is the place, Feng Qi said to the two of them, as he got off from his horse first. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Mulai was dressed in her usual full unfeeling black battle clothes. Her figure very tall, giving people a sense of power and security when being with her. She lifted one leg slightly, and then flipped herself off her horse agilely. Mu Qi then got off his horse behind them, and followed them to make his way inside. It was very serene and quiet inside the courtyard, a great place for recuperation and rest. Feng Qi was in front as he led the way, saying as he walked, "We will really be troubling young Miss Feng greatly this time. Our brother has been afflicted with this tormenting condition for a few months already, and we hope that he can be alleviated from his suffering this time. Since I've come here, I will definitely do everything I can to cure him," Mulai said indifferently. Feng Qi smiled, seemingly consoled, and just as he was about to say something, a maniacal and painful roar suddenly came out from inside the house, and his face immediately changed. Chapter 86. 1. Dark Sovereign Snake Chief. Don't torture yourself like that anymore. Stop doing that, a good-looking youth with a smooth and fair complexion exclaimed anxiously. When he had come back, he had paced about in the surrounding area a few times, but had not dared to go forward. The few other people beside him were also at a loss on what to do, their faces looking highly conflicted. What made it more terrifying to see was a tall and large figure standing by the window. From the light shining inside, it projected the shadow of countless black snake heads weaving madly upon the window, seeming to occupy a good half of his entire body, that was continuing to spawn at a horrifying speed. Sharp hissing could be heard intermittently, and a malevolent-looking snake's head then bore out from inside his body, through flesh and blood, that could no longer be called a human, but a monster whose body had been taken over by countless snake heads. That man held a sharp sword in his hand, the expression on his face looking like he had gone a little mad as he swung the blade repeatedly to slice off those snake heads, like it made him feel just a tad bit better. But every time he cut them off, those snake heads would turn into a pool of blood once they hit the ground, to respawn at an even more maniacal speed. Those snake heads had not suffered damage from his actions, but it just made him become even more weak, as those snake heads materialized from his own blood, and what he was doing was merely injuring himself further, to make himself gain a moment of consolation. "Chief, don't hurt yourself like this anymore." Feng Qi had gone to bring the Mu family of elixir cultivators, young Miss Mu, to come treat your condition. You will be able to recover from this very soon, the good-looking youth said with his face all creased up. Another burly and muscular man with coarse hard looks also said in a deep voice, "Ajahn, you are the main pillar of the assassination temple. For the sake of the assassination temple, you've got to pull yourself together. You are such a proud man. How can you possibly lose your mind over this mere snake poison?" The man, who had a good half of his body all covered with snake heads, and his eyes red, had an unbelievably agonizing expression on his face. Because of the excruciating torment, he had bitten through the skin on his lips and blood was trickling down the corner of his mouth. Together with those snake heads weaving madly about, anyone who was a little more timid might very well die from fright at the sight. Snake poison. This isn't snake poison. The man had his teeth tightly clenched together, as he paused between every word, and his voice, which was low and raspy, sounded filled with despair, broke out in laughter. "No one will be able to save me. No one can." He was talking like he knew something, his body exuding the scent of death, harboring absolutely no hope of surviving through this. There were countless times that he wanted to end his own life, but his brothers in arms, who had gone through life and death with him, had not once given up on him, trying all ways and means to save him. It was already midnight, and it was time that people were all sound asleep, but a particular courtyard in the capital's suburbs was brightly lit with lamps. If not for Feng Qi's explanation that the strange affliction relapsed only at night, Mulai would not have rushed her way over here at the expense of her sleep. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. And having just stepped inside, they had already heard that agonizing roar. which caused Feng Qi to reach the room at an extremely fast speed. Ajahn, young Miss Mu has come. Feng Qi dodged quickly. Almost at the same moment that the door was opened, a dark shadow filled with sinister malevolence shot right straight towards his face. Feng Qi's eyes widened as he stared, and before his body even reacted, something tightened around his waist. A soft whip had coiled around his body, which brought him away to safety. That black shadow then fell onto a patch of grass in front. Under the light from the moon, he saw the patch of grass that had been thriving suddenly turn into dark ash, rotted away. Chapter 86. 2. Dark Sovereign Snake. A chilling shiver ran through Feng Qi unconsciously, and he went on to say with trepidation in his voice, "Thank you, young Miss Mu, for lending a helping hand. If it wasn't for the fact that Mu Lai had coiled her whip around him and brought him out of harm's way, it was feared that he would now have been reduced into a set of skeletal bones already." "No problem." Mu Lai narrowed her eyes. If she had really seen what she thought she did, it had looked very much like the head of some sort of a beast. In that instant that it had fallen to the ground, it had turned into a pool of blood, which then rotted away a whole patch of grass. When the wind blew over that rotted patch of grass, a strange smell then spread into the air. The expression on her face changed and she quickly shouted, "Cover your nose and mouth quick, and hold your breath." Mu Qi and Feng Qi, who were right beside her, immediately did as they were told. Upon hearing that, Mu Lai took out 2 elixir pills and said to them, "Eat it. They are antidote pills." She was an elixir cultivator and had always been fiddling with herbs and medicines since she was very young, developing her sense of smell to become highly sensitive. Poisons that attacked one's body through smell wouldn't have any effect on her, but it was different for most other people. Even a little bit of the smell could possibly deliver a lethal strike upon them. Just what kind of a poison was this that it was so powerful? Mu Lai's gaze stared icily into the room that was now open, and he could see several tall male figures standing stiffly in there. And under the flickering candlelight, the image of a horrifying figure was projected on the paper of the window. It looked like a man with a very tall stature, but the figure was tall in a rather unusual way. Right at the top was a thick and massive snake's head with its jaws wide open and spitting out its long forked tongue. Its eyes big as bronze bells that flashed with an evil red light. "What is that thing?" Mu Qi's eyes were wide as he stared, his face growing slightly pale as looked at the massive and indistinct figure projected upon the window. Feng Qi also stood there in a daze, stunned in place completely. That thick and powerful-looking snake head hissed menacingly, and its brutal and tyrannical power sent everyone in the room flying away. Those men were all part of the highly mysterious 10 great assassins, who possessed profound cultivation, but they were at that moment like flies who were unable to retaliate at all, as they crashed heavily to the ground, and they all vomited out a mouthful of blood. The man inside who had been overtaken by devilry had at that moment lost all his rationality. "Feng Qi, bring them away," one of the men said as he struggled to stand up, his voice weak as he continued to say, "Ajahn is no longer rational and has lost control of his body." Do not let the assassination temple's affair implicate the innocent. Inside the room was a tumultuous bout of chaotic roars, as the towering figure revealed its real identity. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's face was fully covered with the snake scales, his red eyes filled with ruthless and malevolent murder. Half his body was human, and the other half was filled with a nauseating writhing bunch of black snake heads. And right above the top of his head, the leading snake head stood poised, its blood red, large bronze bell eyes staring excitedly at the bunch of men before it. Spitting out its forked tongue, it then let out a highly raspy voice that grated on the ears to say, "So much highly nourishing food." The expression on everyone's faces changed. This abomination is actually capable of human speech? That was an ability that only spirit beasts above the 8th grade can possibly possess. Could it be? Just as they were all silently making their own deductions, a cold and scornful voice sounded suddenly, the female saying in a highly indifferent tone. What are you? I have seen many spirit beasts who have yet to attain their physical forms, but this is the first time I am seeing one that's like you, such an audacious monster that dares to try to forcibly take over a human body. The leading snake head looked taken aback before it then weaved its head in the air, lowering itself down to get a better look at her. Its raspy voice sounded highly amused as it said, "What an interesting little doll we have here. To think that you are not afraid at all. This is my first time encountering such an interesting soul, and I think it will increase my spirit powers by quite a lot after I devour you." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.